You are being transferred. The cold-eyed manager, Alex, announced my reassignment, and I couldn't hide my shock. The destination was a store located on a remote island, far from the big city. Among the employees, it was rumored that being transferred there was akin to a demotion. This is a final decision. If you have complaints, take them to headquarters. Faced with Alex's stern words, I couldn't argue. However, on this island, surrounded by crystal clear skies and the vast ocean, I was destined to encounter something extraordinary. Will you, with me? Captivated by her blushing smile as she extended her hand, I found myself naturally reaching out to take it. My name is Michael. I work at a major sports goods company, Williams Sporting Goods. My main duties involve stocking and managing orders at the retail store. I handle inventory in the backroom, tracking sales and arranging supplies. But then, Michael, help! The register just stopped working. Can you fix this? A coworker from my team pointed to a malfunctioning register. After a quick check, it seemed to be a minor issue I could handle without calling for a technician. I grabbed some tools, made a few adjustments, and the register was back in action. Thank you, Michael. As she enthusiastically shook my hands up and down, another colleague peeked in. Michael, can you come here for a second? I finished setting up the hiking gear section. Can you check if it looks okay? He led me to the hiking section. In the hiking section, various items like boots, backpacks, and trekking poles were neatly arranged. I took a moment to survey the layout. It looks good, but this backpack is for women, right? Maybe it'd be better placed lower, where it's easier to reach. I thought it looked better higher up, but yeah, you're right. Women are generally shorter than men. And this bear bell, why not put it somewhere more visible? With all the recent bear incidents, I think customers might be more inclined to buy one if they see it right away. Good point. He stroked his chin thoughtfully and began reconsidering the layout. Just then, another coworker appeared, calling out, Michael! Michael! Help! There's a foreign customer asking for product recommendations, but I'm terrible at English. They barely understand Japanese. Following the nearly tearful coworker, I approached a customer who was trying out different baseball gloves. In English, I asked what he was looking for and learned he was joining a recreational baseball team and wanted to know the best glove for his position. Since he primarily played first base, I lined up some first baseman's mitts and explained the features of each. After trying several, the customer seemed undecided. Observing his attire and mannerisms, I suggested one that seemed like a good fit, and he ended up loving it enough to buy it. Thank you. It's great having you at this store, Michael. Seriously, you're so helpful. You're good with machines, knowledgeable about products, and you can speak English without hesitation. As my coworkers gathered around, singing my praises, Alex appeared. It's still work hours. Stop slacking and get back to your tasks. Okay, they replied reluctantly, dispersing to their respective duties. And you, Michael? Isn't your job something other than customer service or displays? Sorry, but isn't it natural to step in and help when others can't handle something? At this, Alex shot me a cold glare. Just get back to your station. His sharp tone sent me straight back to the stockroom. Alex had always been strict and unapproachable, but lately, he seemed especially harsh toward me in particular. As I sighed, I noticed Alex making a phone call, his expression grim. Something about it gave me a bad feeling. And that feeling turned out to be right. The next day, as I arrived at work, Alex called me over and said, Michael, you are being transferred. I couldn't hide my shock at the location Alex coldly announced. It was a store on a remote island, far from the big city. The very existence of a store there was puzzling, and among the employees, it was rumored that being sent there was essentially a demotion. Why is Michael being sent to some remote island? Alex, we'll be in trouble if Michael leaves. Employees who had apparently been eavesdropping voiced their shock and objections. But when Alex shot them a glare, everyone fell silent. This is a final decision. If you have complaints, take them to headquarters. After Alex's stern declaration and departure, the employees gathered around me. Michael, what are we supposed to do without you? That's definitely just Alex being spiteful. He's always been envious of you. I bet he's worried you'll take his position as manager. Since you're so capable. As my coworkers chattered noisily, I gazed out the window. The clear blue sky outside stood in stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. After about 3 hours of weaving through the waves on a jet boat, I arrived at my destination. Stepping off the boat, I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the island's pristine air. Looking up, I saw seagulls circling in the cloudless blue sky. On the way to the store where I'd been reassigned, I took in the sights of the island. Everywhere I looked, there were beaches, surfers, old houses, cliffs, lush greenery, and that vast blue sky. It was an incredibly peaceful place. The locals I passed all greeted me warmly with good morning, their expressions calm and kind. Of course, I returned their smiles. Walking leisurely, I soon arrived at my destination. The entrance wasn't an automatic door but a pair of swinging double doors. Excuse me, I'm Michael. I've been assigned here starting today. As I entered and greeted the store, a woman sitting at the register, reading a book, looked up. Her short, neatly trimmed hair suited her cute features perfectly. The moment our eyes met, I felt as if my heart had been struck by lightning. This was what people called love at first sight. Her wide, jewel-like eyes opened even wider as she stared at me. When I tilted my head in confusion at her expression, she pursed her lips slightly. She might have been surprised that I'd arrived earlier than expected. Hold on a moment. She stood up and rang a bell sitting on the counter. As I admired her voice, which felt vaguely familiar and endearing, 4 men emerged from the back room. I'm Claire. I'm the manager here. Just call me Claire. And these are the employees. There are 2 more, but they're off today. I'll introduce them another time. As Claire introduced them, the 4 men lined up in front of me and greeted me with a quick "Nice to meet you." I returned the greeting, and they promptly disappeared back into the back room as if their obligation had been fulfilled. Left alone with Claire, my heart began to race. If I remembered correctly, she was the daughter of the company president, Mr. Williams. I hadn't realized she was such an incredible person. If I had known, I would have worked harder to get assigned to her store sooner. While my mind spun with these thoughts, Claire continued speaking. This store is nothing like the one you worked at before. Hardly any customers come here, so just take it easy. Take it easy. I widened my eyes at her words and glanced around the store. Even so, everything here is neatly displayed, and it's spotlessly clean. Oh, that's because we have an employee who loves cleaning. I nodded in understanding, though something about it still didn't sit right with me. As I stared at Claire, she frowned slightly, her cheeks reddening, and asked, "What are you looking at?" Adorable. No, wait. I pulled myself together and studied her again. Her eyes seemed to hold a mixture of hope and resignation. Claire, deep down, you don't really think it's okay not to work properly, do you? Huh? My words left her mouth hanging open in surprise. You feel like things need to be done properly, don't you? But maybe you're running away from something? As I puzzled over what that something could be, Claire's eyebrows shot up, and she glared at me. I told you, I don't think that, you idiot. Just go to the back room and learn how things work from someone else. She had called me an idiot right after meeting me. Well, maybe I deserved it for asking something so intrusive. Fair enough, I guess. Still, even when she's angry, she's incredibly cute. It made me want to impress her, so I decided to do the opposite of what she said and push myself harder. The next day, while I was at the backroom computer researching something, Claire appeared beside me. What are you doing? Just looking something up. Aha! Well, never mind that. I'm going to show you around the island. Right now? I glanced up at the clock. I had just come back from lunch, so it was a little after 1 p.m. You and I both have supply work this afternoon, right? But today's not a delivery day, and we haven't sold anything, so there's no need to order. We're free. Without waiting for an answer, Claire headed outside. I closed the browser and rushed after her. I had no intention of missing this chance to be alone with her. The only sounds were the waves and wind rustling through the trees, accompanied by the cries of seagulls overhead. Claire and I walked side by side along a road completely free of cars. Naturally, I took the driveway side. After a while, we arrived at the port, the very spot where I first set foot on this island. Now, there were no ferries or jet boats, just a cluster of fishing boats bobbing on the water. That's the only convenience store on the island. It's not like the ones in the city, the selection is pretty sparse. And it closes when the sun sets. Peering through the glass walls, I saw an older man who seemed to be the clerk, sitting at the cashier and reading a newspaper. Claire had been reading a book when I first arrived, too. People here sure seemed relaxed. The shops are all clustered in this area. As she spoke, she introduced the stores lined up along the coast, one by one. When I glanced out at the sea, I saw 3 surfers enjoying the waves. After that, she showed me the town hall, the clinic, the police box, lodging facilities, and the elementary school, bringing us to about halfway around the island. We had reached the northern part of the island. There were no houses, no shops, not even a hint of people in this area. Just overgrown vegetation, sandy beaches, the sea, and the vast blue sky. Nobody comes here. It's my favorite spot. You're the first person I've ever told about it. Even though there was no one else around, she leaned in close and spoke in a low voice, making my heart race. She sat down on the sandy ground, and I followed suit. The ocean breeze played with her hair. Still, getting transferred to such an unremarkable place must have been tough for you, Michael. Not at all. This island is peaceful, the nature is beautiful, and it's wonderful here. I'm determined to do my best. Claire tilted her head. Do your best. But I told you, there's nothing to do here. No, there is something we can do. There isn't. Hardly any young people live here. There's only one elementary school, and it doesn't even have 10 students. At best. Those kids come to buy sneakers, or the teachers buy supplies for their lessons. That's about it for our store. No, there is something. Look. I pointed at the ocean, but Claire only tilted her head in confusion. It seemed she didn't understand what I meant. Yesterday and today, I saw people surfing out there. This ocean is perfect for surfing. The waves are great. When I looked it up online earlier, I found out this spot is known among certain surfers as a hidden gem. If we promote this, we could attract more surfers. We could target them by selling surfboards and wetsuits. Claire studied the waves in front of us intently. I don't really know if these are good surfing waves or not. They are. I can tell, I have an advanced surfing certification. Why do you even have something like that? Claire sighed in exasperation. Ignoring her reaction, I laid out the plan I'd been thinking of since yesterday. I was thinking of using our equipment to make a video of me surfing and posting it online for promotion. If it catches on, it might go viral. Oh. And don't worry, you can all just keep doing your usual tasks. I'll handle it myself. Trying to reassure her that I wouldn't burden anyone, I added that detail. But instead, she let out another big sigh. Why are you so motivated? You know, don't you? In our company, it's rumored that being transferred here means you've been demoted. Of course, I know. But I believe there's a reason I was sent here. Looking ahead, I saw the sunlight glinting on the waves. Ever since I was a kid, I've been able to do anything without much effort, whether it was studying or sports. Because of that, my parents taught me that I should always help those who struggle. I've kept that in mind ever since. That's why, even here, I'll just do what I can. Helping those who can't, huh? Claire pouted slightly and looked down. Curious, I leaned in to look at her face, but before I could, she stood up abruptly. By the time I looked up, the pout was gone, replaced by a smile. Let's do it together, then. Not just me, but everyone in the store. We don't have much else to do, so why not try it for fun? Still sitting on the sand, I watched as Claire extended her hand toward me with a smile. The sunlight reflecting off the waves seemed to form a halo around her. Mesmerized by her radiance, I instinctively reached out and took her hand. Her hand was warm and steady as she gripped mine. The project, which we named the Surfing Spot PR campaign, was announced by Claire to the entire team. I've already contacted headquarters to request a full set of surfing gear. Once it arrives, we'll kick things off. Michael will do the surfing. Leo will handle filming, and Ryan will help with transporting equipment. Max will edit the video and use it for promotion. Meanwhile, Tyler, Lucas, and Jake will take care of the store. Watching Claire assign roles so efficiently, I couldn't help but stare in awe. Noticing my gaze, she gave me a triumphant look. Leo takes photos of the scenery around here all the time, so he knows the best angles. Ryan is strong, and Max is great at editing videos. As for Jake, he's a rain magnet, so it's best not to bring him along. The employees burst into laughter at her remark. Even Jake, the so-called rain magnet, laughed along, showing no sign of dissatisfaction. And that was true for everyone else as well. That's amazing, Claire. You're so good at bringing everyone together. You've got real leadership skills. Not at all. When I honestly told her what I thought, she looked slightly flustered. When the full set of surfing equipment arrived, we immediately headed to the beach. The weather was perfect with clear skies and ideal waves. Luckily, not a single other surfer was there. It was the perfect day for filming. It had been 3 years since I last surfed, back when I got my certification. But it didn't take long to get the hang of it again. Within 10 minutes, I was riding the waves smoothly. The waves here were easier to ride than any I'd experienced before. I got so into it that I forgot we were filming and just enjoyed surfing to the fullest. Michael, we've got enough footage. Let's take a break and head back. Hearing Claire call out, I glanced at my watch and realized I'd been riding waves for 2 hours. As soon as I became aware of it, a wave of exhaustion hit me. When I returned to the shore, I found Claire, Leo, and Ryan sitting on a spread-out plastic sheet. Leo was busy reviewing the footage, staring intently at the camera screen. I made lunch. If you'd like, help yourself, Claire said, opening a large lunchbox. Inside the boxes were homemade rice balls and various side dishes. My stomach growled loudly. Did you make this yourself, Claire? Well, yes, sort of, she replied, her cheeks tinged with pink. Grateful, I raised my hands in surrender and decided to partake. There's dessert too. I didn't have time to make it, so I bought it from the convenience store, sweet dumplings. Oh, I'll skip the lunch. Just give me the dessert, Ryan quipped. Hey, Ryan. That's rude, Claire protested. If Ryan doesn't want it, I'll eat it all myself, I said, pulling the lunchbox closer while Ryan grabbed the dessert package. Claire, though chiding me with "you'll get a stomachache if you eat that much," seemed pleased watching me enjoy her food. The promotional video edited by Max using Leo's footage was uploaded to a major video platform, thanks to Claire's connections with headquarters. In just one day, the video surpassed 10,000 views. While surfers were the primary audience, many viewers were also captivated by the ocean, sky, and natural beauty showcased in the video. This led to an influx of visitors to the island. We pushed surfing gear to the forefront in the store, resulting in a significant boost in sales. When even professional surfers started showing up, we were genuinely stunned. Moreover, the increased tourist interest in activities beyond surfing brought newfound vitality to the entire island. It was a welcome and unexpected outcome. And now, a toast to celebrating our record-breaking sales. Claire cheered, kicking off our celebration. Though modest, it was a gathering in the store's backroom after closing, with everyone sharing drinks and snacks they had brought. Claire's homemade dishes, like omelets and fried chicken, were a treat for me. You know, the store feels so different at night, like it has a unique charm, like being in a school after hours. Hearing that, Lucas nodded and said, "Yeah, that's true." Speaking of schools at night, that reminds me of ghost stories. I heard there's an old one tied to this island from a local, Jake said. What kind of story? Tell us. Ryan asked eagerly, his voice brimming with anticipation. Jake set down his beer can and adopted a serious expression. Long ago, a ship sank off the northern shore of this island. Apparently, it belonged to a group of troublemakers who had been plundering the surrounding islands. The locals decided to teach them a lesson and sabotage the ship. It's said that the crew, who perished in the wreck, became vengeful spirits. Every night, they wander the northern beach, and those who see them are cursed with misfortune. A heavy silence fell over the group. Suddenly, Tyler clapped his hands, startling Claire, who jumped in her seat. Let's have a test of courage. We'll pair up and head to the northern beach. That sounds fun. Let's do it. Ryan chimed in enthusiastically. Fueled by excitement, Tyler grabbed a piece of paper and eagerly started drawing lots for the pairs. Let's not do this. If there's a legend like that, it probably means the northern beach is dangerous at night, Claire argued. What's this, Claire? Are you scared? No, of course not. Ryan grinned as he spoke, and Claire shot back with a flustered tone, visibly agitated. Then Claire goes first. Tyler held out the lot drawing, and Claire hesitantly wrote down her name. Okay, next is Michael. Tyler said, holding the paper in front of me with his finger strategically placed on one line. I tilted my head in question, but he just smiled brightly. Reluctantly, I wrote my name in the designated spot, prompting Tyler to nod in satisfaction. Once everyone had written their names, the results were announced. I ended up being paired with Claire. Tyler, you set this up, didn't you? I whispered to Tyler, making sure Claire couldn't hear. He grinned mischievously. Of course I did. You like Claire, right? I'm rooting for you. Go for it. Far from being annoyed, I was actually grateful and thanked him. With a flashlight in hand, Claire and I headed toward the northern beach. The northern beach was the spot Claire had recommended earlier, saying no one ever went there. Perhaps the ghost story was the reason for its emptiness, even during the day. Unlike when she guided me around the island, Claire's pace was much slower this time. Are you okay? We can forfeit if you want. What? Do you think I'm scared of ghosts too, Michael? Not at all. Suddenly, I remembered one of my students from when I worked part-time as an online English conversation tutor. That was back when I was studying abroad in the US. Because it was summer, I told a ghost story in English, and even though the student was clearly terrified, she tried to act tough, saying, I'm not scared at all. As I recalled this, the bushes nearby rustled suddenly. Ah! Claire let out a cute scream, clinging to my arm. It turned out to be a black cat leaping out from the bushes. Without a collar, it was likely a stray. It crossed in front of us and disappeared. A black cat. It's a bad omen when one crosses your path. Claire clung tighter to my arm. The softness I felt made my brain momentarily overheat. But I quickly composed myself. In Japan, a black cat crossing your path is considered good luck. The bad omen idea is more of a foreign superstition. Really? So it's the opposite here compared to overseas. She seemed relieved, loosening her grip, though she didn't let go entirely. I noticed her trembling slightly. I couldn't force her to keep going like this. Claire, I think I'm getting scared of heading to the northern beach. What should we do? You're scared? Well, if you're scared, then we have no choice but to forfeit. Exactly. If I'm scared, there's nothing we can do. And so, we turned back, deciding not to continue to the northern beach. It was only then that Claire seemed to realize she'd been clinging to me. She quickly pulled away, flustered. Sorry. I was just startled for a moment. It's not like I was scared or anything. Her blushing face as she tried to explain herself was so adorable that I had to fight the urge to laugh. If I laughed now, I'd surely upset her. We walked a bit apart for a while, but before long, she edged closer to me, looking hesitant. I'm not scared or anything, but you are, right? So wouldn't it help if we held hands? Her flushed cheeks and upward glance made her look so endearing. It was as if she'd gathered all the cuteness in the world. That sounds like a good idea. Would you hold my hand? When I extended my hand, she took it. Her grip was firm, and I noticed her exhaling softly in relief. Pretending not to notice, I walked on through the night. Hey, Michael, do you know why our store is on this island? I shook my head. Claire smiled shyly. This is the birthplace of my grandfather, the founder of Williams Sporting Goods. He started his first sports shop here. And that's how the company began. Even now, our company cherishes this island store because of that connection. Claire gazed up at the night sky. Following her lead, I looked up to see a stunning canopy of stars spread out above us. The deep navy carpet of the night sky, scattered with countless jewels, was a breathtaking sight that could never be seen in the city. Being entrusted with such an important store just because I'm the president's daughter has always been a huge source of pressure for me. I used the lack of customers as an excuse to escape from that pressure. But thanks to you, Michael, I've changed. Seeing you work so hard and stay positive made me realize I need to work hard too. Thank you. And also, Claire paused for a moment and looked down. I'm sorry for getting mad at you the day you first arrived on the island. What you said hit too close to home, and I couldn't help but snap. I didn't mind at all. When I said that, Claire placed a hand on her chest in relief and smiled at me. Her smile shone brighter than the countless stars above us. As tourists and surfers visiting the island became a regular occurrence, our sales growth began to slow down. We need to come up with a new plan. Claire murmured. Lucas, who was cleaning, furrowed his brow and said, What if we invite professional surfers from abroad? When I suggested, Claire and Lucas both exclaimed, What, in unison. Hearing this, Leo and Tyler peeked out from the back room. Most of our current customers are Japanese, right? So, our next target should be foreigners. We can invite professional surfers from abroad to actually surf here and then use that as a promotional strategy. The idea's solid, but I can't speak English. Leo said, and Tyler nodded in agreement. Claire and Lucas can, right? You both handled those foreign tourists the other day. When I looked at them, Claire and Lucas exchanged glances. I only know a little. I left most of it to Claire that time, Lucas admitted. True, Claire was really fluent and confident, I added. Well, you know. It's all thanks to certain experiences. Claire said, raising her eyebrows slightly. In contrast, Lucas frowned. Ryan and Jake aren't good at English either. I'd be worried about bringing in foreign customers with our current abilities. It's fine. I'm confident in my English. I scored 900 points on the TOEIC. Between your surfing certification and this, Michael, what exactly are you aiming for? Tyler asked, sounding exasperated. I scratched my cheek awkwardly. I wanted to be prepared for anything, so I tried a lot of things in college. I even studied abroad in the US. I've also passed certifications in sign language, Japanese, accounting, food specialties, tourism, travel management, and other specialized certifications. You're overqualified, Claire quipped, prompting laughter from the other employees. Well, let's give it a shot. Michael, teach us some English. We can't leave it all to you and Claire. Of course. The relaxed atmosphere seemed to encourage everyone, and they all nodded in agreement. Thanks to Claire's connections, professional surfers from the US, France, and Africa, among other countries, arrived on the island. Since they all spoke English, we decided to handle everything in English. Until their arrival, I led intensive English conversation lessons for the staff. The most important thing in learning to speak a new language is not being afraid of making mistakes. Even in our native language, we make errors sometimes, right? It's the same for native English speakers. As long as your meaning gets across, it doesn't matter if you make a few mistakes. That advice seemed to help. On the day of the event, everyone confidently communicated in English with their assigned surfers. Relieved, I chatted with my own surfer while they tried out the equipment. We lent them our products to enjoy surfing. And Leo captured it all on camera. Michael, you were right, these are amazing waves. This is an incredible surf spot. My assigned surfer exclaimed happily in English. Just then, a loud voice in French echoed across the beach. Hey, what is the meaning of this? Everyone turned to see what was happening, alarmed. It was Jules, a French surfer who had placed second in a world competition. He was shouting furiously at Claire. This surfboard broke after only a short time on the water. I almost got injured. You invited me all the way out here, and this is how I'm treated? The psychological shock is immense. How are you going to take responsibility for this? He seemed to have lost control due to his anger, reverting to his native French. Because of this, Claire, unable to understand what he was saying, looked pale. I told my assigned surfer to wait for a moment and headed over to them. As I got closer, I could see that Claire was on the verge of tears. It pained me to see her like that. I gently moved her behind me and stood in front of the still angry surfer. In fluent French, I said, "Please calm down." Hearing this, his expression shifted. You speak French fluently? Yes, quite well. May I take a look at the surfboard? I'd like to see how it broke. Jules seemed surprised by my fluency in French, and his anger seemed to dissipate. He willingly showed me the surfboard. This looks like it hit a rock or something. Where were you surfing? I asked. Looking sheepish, he replied. I'm sorry. Actually, I was surfing a bit west from here. There were fewer people there. Ah, the west side, there's a rocky area over there, isn't there? So you hit a rock? Yes. This isn't your product's fault. In my panic, fearing for my life, I lashed out and blamed you. I wasn't thinking clearly. And I'm sorry for that. He bowed his head to me first, then turned to Claire and repeated his apology in English before bowing to her as well. The surrounding crowd erupted in applause, cheers, and whistles. Relieved that the crisis had been averted, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. After guiding the surfers back to their accommodations, we returned to the company housing, where everyone headed to their rooms. However, as I reached the entrance, I felt a small tug on my sleeve. It was Claire. I decided to stay. Thank you for earlier. When Jules came back from the ocean and suddenly started yelling, I couldn't understand him and got really scared. As she recalled the moment, tears began streaming down her face. A sharp pain tugged at my heart, and I instinctively pulled her into an embrace. Claire seemed surprised but didn't push me away. Instead, she wrapped her arms around my back. Still, Michael, it's amazing that you can speak French too. Just how many languages do you know? While still holding her, I counted on my fingers. Let's see, 4, no, 5? That's more than I expected, she said, stunned for a moment before giggling softly and resting her forehead against my chest. Our bodies pressed together, and my heart raced like a drum. Thank you, Michael. The sound of the waves gently surrounded us. The PR campaign involving foreign pro surfers was a success, and now international visitors came to the island frequently. They bought surfing gear from our store, boosting sales even further. Additionally, we started a volunteer program teaching English to the islanders. In this way, the entire island became lively once again. It created a wonderful cycle of positivity. Amid this success, Alex, my former manager, showed up just as winter was approaching. It's good to see you doing well. I've heard about it, how sales have increased here since your transfer. It's all thanks to the team at this store. I couldn't have achieved these results on my own. Alex stared at me with his usual cold eyes. Then, to my surprise, he bowed his head. Michael, would you consider returning to our store? Ever since you left, things have been going wrong, and sales have been plummeting. Seeing Alex bowing deeply, I felt a pang of sympathy. But my decision was already made. I'm sorry, Alex, but I'm staying here. Alex slowly raised his head in response. His usual stern look was gone, replaced by an expression full of regret. You're right. I'm sorry for showing up suddenly and saying all this, Alex said, bowing his head slightly. I shook my head gently. No need to apologize. Before my transfer, Mr. Williams, the president, explained everything to me. My reassignment wasn't just a demotion. It was for the sake of your team. You were worried that because I did everything, no one else would have the chance to grow. Alex remained silent, his gaze cast downward. You interviewed me during the hiring process, didn't you? Do you remember? When I mentioned studying abroad in the US, you said, just knowing English isn't enough in today's world. I was so inspired by those words that I worked hard to learn as many languages as I could before joining the company. Thanks to you, I can now use my multilingual skills. You didn't just teach me the value of languages, you also showed me the challenges and joys of work. Thank you. As I spoke, Alex finally raised his head. Do you not resent me? Even though I'm the one who demoted you? Well, I was shocked when you told me I was being transferred, but now I understand the reason. Besides, I've gained so much from being here that I'm grateful, not resentful. A single tear slipped from Alex's eye. He quickly wiped it away with his sleeve and let out a sigh. I've been telling my team not to rely too much on you, yet it seems I was the one who depended on you the most. I need to get my act together. With those words, Alex stood up. He bowed once, then left the store. I followed him out to the storefront. Alex, you're doing great. Your store will bounce back in no time. Good luck. I called out loudly to his retreating back. Alex didn't turn around, but he waved his hand gently as he walked away. After his figure disappeared from view, I returned to the back room. There, I found Claire sitting at her desk, resting her chin on her hand, staring at me intently. Are you going back to your old store? No. Claire let out a relieved sigh. Her sense of relief made me happy as well. Michael, there's somewhere I'd like you to come with me after work, she said, blushing slightly and sounding hesitant. I nodded immediately without hesitation. After work, Claire led me to the northern beach. The sun was still high, but as usual, the place was deserted. Are you okay coming here, Claire? I'm fine. I've come here plenty of times during the day, and nothing's ever happened. It seemed that Claire was confident as long as the sun was shining. I found that part of her endearing and couldn't help but smile softly. She stepped onto the beach and came to a stop. I stood beside her. My father also asked me to return to the headquarters. I think it's because of the store's recent success, she said quietly. Her words surprised me. but I still want to stay here. I want to keep working with the team and bring even more life to this island. So I said no. I turned him down for the same reason, I said. Hearing that, Claire smiled warmly at me. In that case, Michael, I'd like you to teach me another language. Like you did before. Before? You really don't remember, do you? She said, puffing out her cheeks in mock annoyance at my confusion. Michael, you used to be an online English tutor, right? Back when I was a student, I was one of your students. Oh. You were the one who got really scared when I told a ghost story. I was not scared. Her face turned bright red as she protested. That voice, it was unmistakably the voice of that student from the online classes. I figured it out right away, but you acted like we were strangers, she continued. To be fair, back then, you didn't show your face because of privacy rules, and you used a handle instead of your real name. With just your voice as a clue, even I couldn't figure it out immediately. Claire shrugged, then quickly nodded in agreement. You're right. Back then, as the daughter of Mr. Williams, the president, everyone just assumed I would take over the company someday. That expectation put a lot of pressure on me. My father made me start learning English too, but honestly, I wasn't into it. Still, I kept at it because you worked so hard to make the lessons enjoyable. Thanks to you, I became confident in my English skills. Claire crouched down on the sand. I sat down beside her. I used to be just a regular employee like you. Back then, I was still trying my best. But then, all of a sudden, I was made the manager of this store. I guess it's because this store has been treasured for generations. Over time, I realized that I was also responsible for the livelihoods of the people working here. That realization made the weight of my role feel overwhelming. I ended up running away because of that. But I'm not going to run away anymore. Her determined eyes met mine, piercing straight through me. My heart skipped a beat. As if she wouldn't let me escape, she grasped my hand. I love you, Michael. I've felt that way ever since you taught me English. It was because of you that I found the strength to keep going. So, Claire seemed to shine brilliantly before my eyes. I realized with certainty that falling in love with her at first sight had been inevitable. I love you too, Claire. As I leaned in closer, her eyes widened slightly, and a blush spread across her cheeks. Then, as if making up her mind, she closed her eyes tightly. My heart overflowed with affection. Unable to hold back, I gently kissed her. A year had passed since my transfer. Looking at the calendar hanging in the back room, I marveled at how quickly time flies. Michael, a customer's asking for you, Lucas called out to me. When I stepped out, I saw Jules, the French surfer Claire had worked with during our international campaign. I greeted him with a big smile. I watched the broadcast of the recent World Championship. Congratulations on your win. As soon as I congratulated him, he scratched his head bashfully. You're still going strong, I see, he said, glancing around the store. Indeed, there were several customers browsing inside. Lucas, who had just called for me, was now explaining surfboards to a customer who seemed to be trying surfing for the first time. Claire was busy at the register, handling payments. Thanks to you using our surfboards and wetsuits to win, Williams's name has spread like wildfire in the surfing world. Not only has this store seen more customers, but headquarters has been flooded with orders. That's great. I hope this makes up for what happened back then. It more than makes up for it, it's paid back with interest. When I responded with the biggest smile I could muster, Jules gave me a wry grin. At that moment, Claire approached us. It seemed she had left Tyler in charge of the register. After exchanging a few words in French with Claire, Jules turned to us with a smile. I heard you're getting married. Congratulations. News travels fast. Thank you, I replied. As he said, Claire and I were soon to be married. On Claire's left ring finger was a matching wedding band, identical to mine, as she laughed bashfully. "We're planning to have the wedding here on the island," I added. "That's a great idea. The sea and sky here are beautiful, it'll be a fantastic wedding. Make sure to invite me." "Of course." After a firm handshake, Jules said he was heading to the ocean for some surfing. "We're going to have a lot of guests, huh? Your old manager, Alex, is coming too, right?" Claire asked. "Yeah. I'm glad everyone will get to see you on our big day. Although, your wedding dress will be so stunning. I kind of don't want anyone else to see it," I teased. "Michael, stop it." Claire pouted, but her expression quickly softened into a smile. "I've always been able to handle things effortlessly since I was a child. It's a unique ability, and I was taught to use it for the benefit of others, which I've always tried to do. But relying on that alone can stifle not only the growth of those around me but also my own. Working together with those around me. By doing so, everyone can grow, and a positive cycle is created." I vowed to continue collaborating with Claire, my co-workers, the islanders, and those who visit, to further develop Williams and this island together. What should we do? Why does it have to be now? The woman shouting with trembling lips was Sarah, the owner of the restaurant where I worked as a jack of all trades. This restaurant was known for its live piano performances, with a resident pianist playing every day. Among them, the most popular was a young, handsome pianist. His exceptional skills gained traction through word of mouth and social media, drawing more customers to the restaurant. Then, we hit a stroke of luck. A local prominent politician reserved the restaurant. The politician was eager to hear the young pianist's performance and even requested a special piece. But on the very day of the event, the pianist went completely radio silent. At this rate, "Sarah, I'll borrow the outfit," I said. I, the jack of all trades, summoned my courage and stepped forward. "My name is Alex, and I'm 30 years old. I work at a well-known restaurant that's been featured in gourmet magazines multiple times. Even from an employee's perspective, the place is stylish and sophisticated. Of course, it's not just the decor that's top-notch, the food is extraordinary as well. Every time I see customers smile as they take a bite, I can't help but feel a warm sense of satisfaction. Although, I'm not involved in the cooking myself. My tasks are mostly cleaning and dishwashing, the unglamorous side of restaurant work. When I first started working here, I was given various responsibilities, but I froze up and couldn't perform. Eventually, I settled into the role of handling odd jobs. It wasn't just once or twice that I felt ashamed of myself. Why am I so incompetent? That thought consumed me, steadily eroding my self-esteem. The kitchen staff and waitstaff seemed to shine so brightly to me. Even as they moved about briskly, their faces showed a sense of fulfillment, and their dedication to their work was palpable. And then there were the resident pianists. A grand piano graced the restaurant, and the talented pianists performed daily. Their beautiful classical music matched the restaurant's ambience, contributing to its welcoming atmosphere. The effort they must have put in over the years radiated through their confident performances. Their upright postures and radiant expressions exuded an undeniable charisma. I couldn't help but feel like everyone else working here was out of my reach, standing on a higher plane. Especially Michael, the restaurant owner. Not only was he skilled in both the kitchen and the dining floor, but he could also play the piano effortlessly. He was the very embodiment of perfection, like someone from another world. What's more, he was gentle with everyone, always wearing a warm, serene smile. In short, he was a flawless gem of a person, inside and out. He never treated me, the perpetual odd jobs guy, with disdain. Instead, he often spoke to me with heartwarming kindness. "Don't worry. Just do your best at your own pace," he would say. Those words saved me countless times. I wanted to repay Michael. He had once said, "Alex, there's something I'd really like you to do." Agreeing to his request would have been the perfect way to return the favor, but I couldn't bring myself to say yes. And so, 5 years passed since I started working here, still stuck in the same role. I kept telling myself to go at my own pace. If I did, maybe one day I'd finally be able to meet Michael's expectations. That thought motivated me to do my best, even in my small way. However, Michael had passed away. He collapsed in the kitchen and was rushed to the hospital, but he never regained consciousness. He didn't respond to the staff's calls by his side, nor did he so much as flutter his eyelids. I couldn't believe it. I told myself that if I went to the restaurant, he'd greet me with his usual smile, just like always. But no matter how many times I showed up for work, he was nowhere to be found. Of course, I wasn't the only one mourning his loss. Everyone at the restaurant wore somber expressions, the weight of grief hanging heavily in the air. The lights inside the restaurant seemed dimmer, even though none of the bulbs were out. The live piano performances continued as usual, but for some reason, the music seemed quieter than ever before. We have to protect the restaurant Michael cherished so deeply. With that thought, the staff devoted themselves to their work, but confusion and a tense atmosphere gradually took hold. It was the arrival of a new owner that brought order to the chaos. Michael's own daughter, Sarah, stepped in to manage the restaurant. Contrary to expectations that she might resemble her father, Sarah's personality was the complete opposite of his. There was no trace of his warm smile. Instead, her face wore a perpetual scowl. She never spoke kind words to the staff, issuing commands in a cold, clipped tone. When I learned she was my age, I initially felt a sense of camaraderie, but her stern demeanor made her seem much older and far more intimidating. One day, "Why are you so inefficient? Please work more effectively." Sarah's sharp voice rang out in the kitchen. She had come to observe the kitchen staff and, finding their methods lacking in her eyes, began demanding improvements. Everyone averted their gaze, unwilling to meet Sarah's eyes. Even Daniel, the head chef, seemed lost for words, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to figure out how to respond. True, this restaurant often took its time with each task. But that wasn't because of inefficiency, it was in line with Michael's philosophy. If we cut corners, the customers will notice. Every step of the process should be carried out with care, so everyone who dines here can enjoy the best tasting dishes. Michael often shared those words with us. Daniel tried to explain, prefacing with all due respect, but Sarah didn't listen at all. "It doesn't matter what my father said. I'm the owner now. Forget the old way of doing things and follow my instructions from now on." Her sharp words, paired with a piercing glare, made it clear she wasn't going to change her mind. Daniel, unable to argue further, reluctantly replied, "Understood," his face a grimace of suppressed frustration. From that day on, the kitchen shifted to an efficiency-first policy, but it didn't go unnoticed by the customers. While working, I glanced around the dining area and saw that the once blissful expressions of diners had turned to slight frowns and tilted heads. I even overheard comments like, "It's good, but it tastes a little different somehow." Michael's words echoed in my mind, "If we cut corners, the customers will notice." Daniel seemed to be thinking the same, sighing frequently as if resigned to the inevitable. If we kept working like this, the restaurant's reputation might start to decline. One day, as an uneasy atmosphere lingered among the kitchen staff, Sarah gathered everyone together, saying, "I have something to discuss." We all stood there, question marks practically floating above our heads. Sarah stood before us, with a young man positioned behind her. His features were so striking he could have been a model, and standing next to the beautiful Sarah, they looked like a perfect picture. "This is Kyle," Sarah announced. "He'll be the restaurant's new resident pianist starting today." With a slight bow, Kyle introduced himself. According to Sarah, he was a graduate of a prestigious music conservatory. His confident posture made that easy to believe, and I nodded to myself in understanding. He raised his head and surveyed the surroundings with great interest. His expression seemed to say that, "So this is where I'll be performing from now on." As I followed his slow, deliberate gaze, our eyes suddenly locked with an unmistakable intensity. When his gaze met mine, it locked in place. Flustered, I looked away, but I could still feel his intense stare. What could it mean? As I awkwardly glanced at his shoulders, I realized something. His height and build were nearly identical to mine, like a carbon copy. He must have noticed the same because he openly scrutinized me from head to toe before finally turning his attention back to the group. "Let's have Kyle perform for tonight's dinner service," Sarah declared. Kyle's piano skills were exceptional, earning admiration even from the seasoned staff and other resident pianists. Customers paused mid-bite, captivated by his performance. "Amazing," I murmured to myself, though my words were drowned out by the thunderous applause. It felt as though I had stumbled into a concert hall rather than our restaurant. On stage, bathed in the spotlight, there he was. In contrast, I sat in the dimly lit audience, watching him from the shadows. I let out a bitter laugh, thinking how perfectly opposite we were. A few weeks after his arrival, Kyle's piano skills started gaining attention through word of mouth and social media, bringing in more customers to the restaurant. One evening, Sarah approached me directly. "Why are you always stuck with cleaning and dishwashing? There's plenty of other work to do." Ah, the day I had dreaded had finally arrived. Even when Michael was the owner, I could feel the cold stares from the other staff. The kind of looks that seemed to say that it would be totally fine without me. Michael had always been the one to shield me from those gazes. But now that he was gone, I was an oddity in this efficiency-driven environment, sticking to what little I could manage. "Well, I tried to explain that I was just doing the tasks Michael had once encouraged me to focus on. But as Sarah's sharp gaze pierced me, I remembered something. Not long ago, when Daniel brought up one of Michael's policies, Sarah had snapped, "I'm the owner now." It was clear that invoking her father's name would only set her off. Swallowing my words, I instead muttered an apology, "I'm sorry. Other work to do." Perhaps my quick apology had softened the blow, as she let me off with just a warning to be more mindful from now on. "Let's get through this pile of dishes for now." Muttering to myself quietly so no one could hear, I rolled up my sleeves. As Sarah left, Kyle appeared in her place. Gone was his usual polished, gentlemanly smile. Instead, he grinned wickedly, the corners of his mouth curling with mischief. I stared wide-eyed at his drastic change in demeanor, only for him to throw a mocking sneer my way. "So, I saw you getting scolded by Sarah earlier." It seemed he had witnessed the whole scene. I had nothing to deny, so I simply replied, "You're not wrong." Kyle's grin widened even further. "How lame. What are you even doing at your age?" He's absolutely right. No one knows that better than me. I'm already 30, yet I'm still stuck doing odd jobs. Even Sarah, who's my age and already the owner, scolds me for not taking on more responsibilities. And now, here I am, being mocked by someone younger than me like Kyle. It's downright humiliating. Unable to come up with a retort, I could only offer a forced smile. But my silence seemed to spur him on, making his words even sharper. "Seriously, why are you just a handyman? And how did someone as useless as you even get a job at this restaurant?" "I'm here because the previous owner," I began to explain, frustrated and determined to defend myself. I thought this might stop the ridicule, but Kyle cut me off with a sneer. "Oh, never mind. You don't need to explain. Your background is just as useless as you are." His words completely derailed my attempt to speak, leaving me with no choice but to plaster on a vague smile and mutter, "You're right." I knew there was no point in continuing. Kyle wasn't the type to actually listen. However, it became apparent that while he had no interest in hearing others, he was eager to talk about himself. "You know," he began smugly, "a valuable background is one that belongs to someone extraordinary, like me." He spread his arms dramatically, like a speaker on stage. "Did I tell you? I graduated as the top student from a conservatory of music. That's incredible. I wasn't trying to be sarcastic in the slightest. It was genuine admiration that made those words come out. At the same time, a question arose in my mind. Did you ever consider joining an orchestra? With your level of skill, you could make a name for yourself internationally. The moment the words left my mouth, Kyle's demeanor shifted drastically. His face grew tense, and his shoulders began to tremble. His fists were tightly clenched, making it seem like he might lunge at me at any moment. "Shut up, you amateur." Startled, I instinctively braced myself as he shouted angrily and stomped away in an exaggerated manner. Months passed since Kyle had joined the restaurant. Though he had adapted to the environment, his condescending attitude had become his defining trait. In fact, it seemed more accurate to say his mask had slipped, revealing his true nature. He wasn't just mocking me anymore, his scorn extended to Daniel and even the veteran cleaning staff. "Are you seriously charging people for food like this? Is the floor really clean? Why don't you crawl on your hands and knees to check?" His harsh words left the staff fuming, veins visibly bulging on their foreheads. Even when someone retorted, "Don't talk like that," or pleaded, "Stop ruining the atmosphere," it had no effect. Eventually, Kyle even started mocking the restaurant itself, calling it a dump. When confronting him proved futile, the staff turned to Sarah, the owner, for help. Surely, if Sarah, as his boss, gave him a firm warning, Kyle's behavior would improve. However, it became painfully clear that this assumption was far too optimistic. Kyle's attitude is going to destroy this restaurant from the inside. The staff pleaded. "Please, Sarah, you need to be firm with him." But Sarah's response was simply, "Can't you all just get along?" She claimed to have warned him, but judging by Kyle's continued freewheeling behavior, it didn't seem to make much of a difference. To him, her words was not big deal. What's with that guy? How much longer does he need to keep mocking everyone before he's satisfied? The complaints in the staff room grew more frequent. Their frustration was directed not only at Kyle himself but also at Sarah for allowing his behavior to continue unchecked. Sarah's no better. Does she think talent makes up for a broken personality? I listened silently from a distance, sighing softly to myself. I thought that it can't be helped. Kyle's performances had brought in more customers than ever, pushing the restaurant to its busiest peak in history. Given that, letting him go wasn't an option. Sarah was likely balancing the risk of removing Kyle against the need to sustain revenue, struggling with the decision. Amid this tension, a prominent local politician reserved the restaurant for a dinner gathering. It was the most significant event in the restaurant's history. "Let's give it our all," Sarah declared, her eyes alight with determination. In contrast, the staff's faces were clouded with unease. Demoralized by Kyle's behavior, we were no longer in a state to work as a united team. Could we really satisfy such an important guest? Could we even pull this off? Despite those doubts, we had no choice but to move forward. Despite the tension, the staff pressed on with preparations for the big day. They reviewed the menu, procured ingredients, and worked on the necessary prep. Even Kyle, surprisingly, started practicing the piano every night after closing. Can you believe it? That overconfident guy is actually practicing. You'd think he'd just say, "This is easy for me," and call it a day. Watching him from the shadows as he focused on the piano, we whispered among ourselves. The sound of his playing echoed through the empty restaurant. Every time he paused, he muttered, "This isn't good enough," his dissatisfaction clear. He repeated the same phrases over and over, striving for perfection. Maybe he's just clumsy, but deep down, he might be serious about his work, someone murmured. The others nodded silently in agreement. Gradually, the tension directed at Kyle softened, and the hostile atmosphere began to dissipate. Sensing this shift, Sarah visibly relaxed, exhaling a small sigh of relief. But then, disaster struck on the day of the politician's reservation. "Sorry, I'm late," Sarah said, bowing slightly as she arrived after being delayed by another task. She then asked, "Has Kyle arrived yet?" But the staff's uneasy reactions made the answer clear. Exchanging glances, someone hesitantly replied, "No, not yet." Since that morning, no one had been able to contact Kyle. At first, we thought he might have overslept due to nerves, but every call only resulted in the same lifeless dial tone. After waiting a bit, they tried calling him again, but there was still no response. In other words, Kyle had gone completely silent and unreachable. You've got to be kidding me. Why now, of all times? Sarah's already pale face lost all its color, turning as white as paper. Her lips quivered, and for the first time, her usual cool composure was replaced by visible agitation. The ticking of the clock sounded unbearably loud, as if accusing us of our helplessness. Let's just finish the preparations for now. Kyle might show up eventually, she instructed in a weak voice. The staff nodded and resumed their tasks, though unease lingered in the air. As time passed, there was still no word from Kyle. Even the messages sent through the app remained unread. Out of concern, someone even went to check his apartment, only to find it empty. Sarah had muttered earlier, "Why now of all times?" but perhaps it was precisely because of the situation. Crushed by the pressure, I suspected Kyle might have fled. Sarah retreated to the staff room, where she literally held her head in her hands and slumped to the floor instead of sitting on a chair. Her usual commanding presence was nowhere to be seen. It wasn't just her. The other pianists, who had been asked to step in as replacements, were similarly despondent. When asked if they could perform in his place, they all shook their heads in unison. The piece scheduled for today, Islami, is far too difficult. None of us could handle it on such short notice, they admitted. The room filled with an oppressive sense of panic and hopelessness. Then what about a different piece, someone suggested, trying to salvage the situation, but Sarah firmly shook her head. For this reservation, the politician had made a specific request for a piece in advance. It was the Oriental fantasy Islami. It was the promise of having a pianist skilled enough to play it that had secured the reservation. What would happen if the politician found out the performer was missing? What if we switched to a different piece to suit our convenience? It was easy to imagine the disappointment and potential fallout. We have to perform Islami, no matter what. Sarah whispered, her words heavy with despair. Surely, their hearts were filled with a sense of guilt. They probably felt sorry that they couldn't step in as substitutes. No one had any suggestions to break through the impasse. The room sank into a suffocating silence, weighed down by hopelessness. In that moment, Michael's words resurfaced in my mind. Just do your best at your own pace. His kind voice had pulled me through countless struggles. Is there something I can do? If ever there was a time to repay him, wasn't it now? Michael was gone, but the restaurant he cherished was facing a crisis. Wouldn't saving this situation be the ultimate way to repay my debt? To motivate myself, I clenched my hands and steeled my resolve. Then, lifting my head, I walked over to Sarah. Sarah! I'll borrow the outfit. Sarah spun around, her movements so sharp they seemed to slice through the air. The other staff stared at me with disbelief. But I was completely serious. Fixing my gaze on Sarah, I asked, if someone can play Islami, there won't be a problem, right? As Sarah nodded, I added more to my words. I can do it. The person who can play Islami is standing right here, I declared. What? Her response was drenched in disbelief. Normally, Sarah would have scolded me for saying ridiculous things, but now she seemed willing to grasp at any straw. She silently watched as I headed toward where the outfit was kept, making no move to stop me. The other staff were the same. Though they looked at me with skeptical expressions, not one of them stopped me. I quickly changed into the outfit Kyle was supposed to wear. Luckily, since our builds were nearly identical, the outfit fit perfectly, not too tight, not too loose. This feels nostalgic. I murmured unconsciously as I glanced down at my hands. Whether they didn't understand the meaning or simply didn't hear it, I wasn't sure. What I did know was that no one responded to my words. There was still a bit of time before the politicians arrived. Having finished my preparations, I sat down at the piano and lightly pressed the keys. When was the last time I played? I had assumed my skills might have dulled with time, but to my surprise, my body seemed to remember. My fingers moved effortlessly, and a wave of confidence surged within me. However, there was still one issue. The thought of performing after so long, as Alex the pianist, filled me with an overwhelming sense of nervousness that bled into my playing. I wanted to perform. No, I had to perform. But I wasn't eager to show my true identity. As a compromise, I decided to wear one of the decorative masks used as part of the restaurant's decor and perform under the pseudonym Ace. Finally, the moment of the performance arrived. The food had been prepared flawlessly, and the politicians were smiling. Judging by their reactions after tasting the dishes, they seemed more than satisfied. Everything had gone well so far, and I couldn't afford to ruin it with my performance. After taking several deep breaths backstage to calm my pounding heart, I stepped out in front of everyone. The politicians looked thrilled at the prospect of hearing their requested piece. Sarah clasped her hands together as though praying for my success. From the kitchen and dining areas, I could feel the eyes of the staff on me. Yet, the moment I started playing, none of that mattered anymore. All that existed in my world were the black and white keys in front of me. Like a magnet's pull, my hands were drawn to the piano, hitting the keys one after another. I felt as though I were in a concert hall. This time, however, I wasn't in the audience, I was on stage. Bathed in the spotlight and surrounded by the sound I was creating, I felt an overwhelming sense of comfort. Yes, I loved playing the piano this much. Realizing this, I felt tears welling up in the corners of my eyes. Was it sweat trickling down from the heat of the mask, or tears stirred by a swirl of emotions? I couldn't tell. Before I knew it, time had flown by, and I had reached the final notes of the piece. A brief moment of silence followed. As I stood up to bow, the politicians erupted into thunderous applause. I noticed their eyes glistening with tears, streaks of moisture running down their cheeks. I did it. It went well. Having fulfilled my role, I let out a sigh of relief and quickly retreated backstage. Even as I left, the applause continued to echo for quite some time. If it hadn't been for you, I don't know what would have happened. Truly, thank you. After the restaurant closed, Sarah approached me and bowed deeply. Her usual stern face softened, her lips relaxed, and her eyebrows tilted in a gentle curve. It was a fresh expression for her, one I hadn't seen before. Smiling faintly, I replied, "I just did what I could." "I'd like to ask you something," Sarah said, straightening up as she spoke. She probably wanted to ask why I could play the piano, and more importantly, how I managed to perform such a challenging piece. Her next words confirmed my guess. At this point, there was no reason to hide it. I decided to share my background. Actually, I used to attend a music conservatory. After graduation, I spent some time performing with a team overseas. What? Sarah wasn't the only one who shouted in surprise. The chefs, waitstaff, and even the other pianists joined in with their astonishment. Feeling a bit embarrassed by their praise, I scratched the back of my head and chuckled, "I'm just glad I haven't lost my touch." I silently hoped no one would notice how warm my cheeks and ears had become. I had been learning piano since I was a child. It wasn't because my parents forced me into it, it was my own choice. I had been captivated by a professional performance I saw on TV and couldn't get it out of my mind. "I want to play like that," I had declared. That excitement never faded, no matter how many years I practiced. The joy I felt with every improvement. The praise I received from my parents and teachers. I became increasingly engrossed in the piano, and by the time I was in high school, I had a clear goal, which is to become a world-class pianist. My first step toward the dream was to enroll in a music conservatory, and I was fortunate enough to pass the entrance exam on my first attempt. At the conservatory, I honed my skills alongside talented peers, working hard and ultimately graduating as the top student. After graduation, I joined a performance team in Paris, living my dream as a pianist. I remember vividly when things began to go awry. It was when our team welcomed a new member, Ryan. He had been a classmate of mine at the conservatory, also majoring in piano. Ryan was brought in as part of a new initiative to include piano duets in our performances. He hadn't been directly scouted by the team, he'd applied through an open recruitment process and was selected. Well, if Alex knows him, there shouldn't be a problem. The team members reassured me with those words, but deep inside, an indescribable sense of unease lingered in my chest. Ryan was undoubtedly talented, having graduated as the second highest student in our class. However, his personality posed some challenges. He was fiercely competitive, envious, and prone to extreme behavior. In truth, Ryan wasn't supposed to be second. There had been another brilliant pianist between us, someone whose skill was unquestionable. From the start of our time at the conservatory, the three of us had been known as the top three. The other top student and I fueled our rivalry with a healthy competitiveness, focusing on improving each other's skills rather than obsessing over rankings. We would sometimes listen to each other's performances, offer constructive advice, and incorporate what deserved praise. Ryan, however, was a bit different. It seemed he had a mindset of that he alone deserves to be number one, and he would crush anyone in his way. To target the second-ranked student, he resorted to underhanded tactics, such as hurling insults and even hiding essential sheet music, relentlessly sabotaging them. Eventually, the second-ranked student dropped out of the conservatory. Perhaps Ryan had planned to target me next, but before he could, graduation arrived, and I narrowly escaped his grasp. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine ending up on the same team as him after graduation. It was easy to imagine the kind of treatment I would face. And sure enough, he used every possible tactic to try and drive me out. He spread false rumors, claiming Alex had a bad reputation in school. He didn't deserve to be valedictorian, he cheated his way to the top. He sent anonymous emails to my work account, filled with insults like, "You're terrible," and "You're a burden to the team, just quit." After enduring this for a year, my mental health deteriorated. I began having nightmares where Ryan appeared to hurl insults at me, leaving me unable to sleep. The thought of facing him gave me severe stomachaches before practice, nearly every time. Even when I managed to show up, my heart would pound uncontrollably during performances, my hands would sweat, and I'd fumble the keys. My physical health began to suffer alongside my mental well-being. "I really am just a burden now, aren't I?" Ryan's words echoed in my mind, and I couldn't stop blaming myself. Eventually, I left the team. I spent a few days packing my belongings, preparing to return to Japan. The night before my departure, I decided to have one last meal in Paris and headed to a high-end restaurant. I wanted to leave with at least one good memory. By chance, I happened to meet a Japanese there. We hit it off quickly. As we were both dining alone and preparing to return to Japan soon, that person turned out to be none other than Michael, the former owner of this restaurant. He was in Paris training as a chef. Though he had started late in life, he was determined to return to Japan and open his own restaurant. He told me about his vision, a restaurant with live piano performances instead of background music. Enough about me. Tell me about yourself. What were you doing in Paris? Michael asked. I hesitated, my gaze darting away as I muttered, "Well." At the time, I hated even admitting that I had been playing the piano. However, under his persistent gaze, I gave in and reluctantly answered, "Piano." Michael's eyes lit up with excitement. "A pianist from that team? I can't let someone like you slip away. Once you've had some time to settle your thoughts, would you consider joining my restaurant?" he said, speaking rapidly, almost like a machine gun. Me? Play piano again? I wanted to refuse, but I thought that I've come this far because I love the piano and my feelings would change over time. Before I knew it, I was nodding in agreement. The next day, I returned to Japan and began working at his restaurant. Though I never played the piano again while Michael was alive, performing recently and receiving applause gave me a small boost in confidence. A few months later, the story of the mysterious ace spread after a restaurant interview, sparking interest. There were even people trying to scout Ace away to other establishments. Today, someone else had arrived asking to meet Ace. Sarah approached me, holding out a business card. It bore the name of a famous music company, along with the person's name, contact details, and photo. When I saw it, my eyes widened. It was Ryan, the very person who had driven me out of the team. Back then, I had been too exhausted to feel anger, but seeing his face again, a fiery rage ignited within me. "If you're too busy, we can decline," Sarah said. But that burning feeling fueled my resolve, and I replied immediately, "I'll meet him." Wearing my costume and mask, I entered the meeting room. Sure enough, it was Ryan. His face unchanged despite the 5 years that had passed that only made my anger burn brighter. He had no idea I was glaring at him from behind the mask. Instead, he smiled brightly and said, "It's an honor to meet you," while rubbing his hands together. What an insincere smile. Surely, there was something dark lurking beneath it. "What brings you here today?" Sarah asked politely. Ryan eagerly pulled out a company brochure and handed it to us. "We would love for Ace to join our company as an exclusive pianist," he declared. I slowly reached out, took the brochure, and began flipping through its pages. Seeing my reaction, Ryan seemed to believe he had secured a favorable response and began talking rapidly. "Someone with your talent shouldn't settle for a mere restaurant." "Sarah, don't you agree it's a waste to keep him isolated here?" Even though he was here for business, his words were incredibly rude. It seems that a person's true nature is something that rarely changes. It's like watering a withered flower, it simply won't come back to life. "You arrogant jerk. Even as an adult, your rotten core hasn't changed, Ryan," I shouted, pulling off my mask. When my face emerged, Ryan froze, his jaw dropping as if it might unhinge. His wide eyes silently asked why I was here. I briefly explained what had happened after he drove me out of the team. Ryan, now pale, stammered in a hoarse voice, "That's impossible. Why are you playing the piano again? I made sure to crush you and implant that trauma." It was true, because of Ryan, I couldn't bring myself to play the piano for a long time. But the love I had for the piano and the years of practice were ingrained in me. It all came rushing back when I performed at the restaurant. "There's no way someone like you could destroy those feelings," I shot back. "Damn it." Perhaps startled by my outburst as I stood up, Ryan stumbled out of his chair, ready to flee. "You're free to leave," I said, "but just so you know, this conversation has been recorded." Hearing that, Ryan glared at me but didn't respond, leaving the room with slumped shoulders and an air of defeat. His eyes lacked their usual menace, and there was no sense of intimidation. "What was that all about?" Sarah asked, shrugging and chuckling at the now quiet room. I smiled faintly and replied, "Who knows?" Naturally, Ryan's actions were reported to his company. A week later, after their internal investigation, the results came in. Ryan, it turned out, had been removed from the team about a year after I left due to his arrogance. After returning to Japan, he joined his current company in a scouting role, but his condescending attitude earned him a poor reputation. Recently, he had achieved a notable accomplishment. That was successfully scouting Kyle away. The reason Kyle hadn't shown up that day was because he had already gone to join Ryan. However, after causing multiple scandals involving women and treating others with the same disdainful behavior he'd shown at the restaurant, Kyle's contract was quickly terminated. Where Kyle is now or what he's doing remains unknown. Meanwhile, Ryan's other problematic actions came to light, leading to his dismissal for damaging the company's reputation. As for Ace, my name began spreading further. I was invited as a guest performer at concerts and even played for welfare facilities and municipal events. Despite these opportunities, I had no intention of going independent or joining another company. I believed that making my piano famous and helping the restaurant thrive was the best way to honor Michael's memory. One day, after returning from a guest performance, I heard the sound of piano music at the station. Ah, a street piano. I thought and walked toward the source. To my surprise, it was Kyle playing. A crowd had gathered, captivated by his performance, with murmurs of admiration. He's amazing, and what talent! A small camera was set up next to the piano, suggesting he might be live streaming. There was even a sign with what appeared to be his social media handle. So, he had chosen a different path but continued playing. When he finished the piece, applause erupted from the crowd. I joined in, clapping my hands with the others. "Any requests?" Kyle asked, smiling warmly. A young boy in the front, who looked about kindergarten age, called out, "Acorns rolling." The cheerful atmosphere made me smile as Kyle, still grinning, replied, "Okay," and began playing. It seemed his arrogance had faded, leaving behind a much humbler version of himself. His piano skills, too, had improved significantly since his time at the restaurant. He was a completely different person now. I didn't say anything, simply turned on my heel and walked away. As I did, I vowed to continue honing my skills so I wouldn't lose to him. Only my name tag is just like this. Lily handed me a name tag with trembling hands, the word middle school graduate boldly printed on it. Then, she collapsed into tears on the spot. I stormed into the venue where the company entrance ceremony was being held and shouted Alex's name. From the commotion, a man stepped forward and walked toward me. This must be Alex, I thought. He had an untrustworthy face that practically screamed suspicious. I shoved the name tag in his face and coldly asked, "Did you make this?" Alex nodded as if he understood. "Ah, I see what's going on here. You're Lily's family, right?" That name tag must have been handed to her by mistake, probably someone's prank. "You think you can just brush this off as a prank?" Now, calm down. If you let something like this bother you, you're not going to survive in the working world. We'll get Lily her proper name tag. So please ask her to come back here. That's all from me. At that moment, I swear I heard the sound of my patience snapping. This guy won't get away with this. As Alex turned his back on me and started to walk away, I quietly said, "Call the board. You're all fired." After this, Alex, who dared to humiliate my precious granddaughter, would experience his personal hell. My name is Henry Grant. I am 62 years old. A generation ago, I would already have retired and been living a quiet life, but I am still working full-time. Let me clarify, it's not because I need the money. My 3 children are independent, with families of their own, and my wife and I have saved enough to live comfortably in retirement. The reason I don't retire is simple. I can't imagine giving up the job I've devoted decades of my life to. I seem to be a natural-born workaholic. In my younger years, I thought about work constantly, even in my sleep. Whenever I took long vacations, I'd inevitably fall ill, so there was a time when I worked through my days off. Nowadays, I try to delegate tasks to my subordinates and avoid working overtime or coming in on weekends, as my wife and children scold me for overdoing it. It's a little frustrating to have less time for work, but I am grateful to still have a place where I am needed at my age. Fortunately, I've always been in good health. Even at this age, I've never had a single serious illness. The younger folks at work probably wish I'd retire already, but I plan to keep going until my body gives out. Now, even a workaholic like me has personal concerns. My granddaughter, Lily, is one of them. Out of my 6 grandchildren, Lily is the only girl. It might be unbecoming of a grandfather to say, but I've always had a soft spot for Lily. I know I favor her more than the others. Even when my wife scolds me, I secretly give Lily spending money or buy her little things. I have no intention of stopping. I thought I was being discreet, but eventually, my favoritism toward Lily became an open secret in the family. The other grandchildren stopped complaining. They were probably resigned to the fact that I'd always spoil her. My wife and the others assume I dote on Lily just because she's a girl, but that's not entirely true. Yes, I was overjoyed when my first granddaughter was born, but what makes me particularly protective of Lily is her personality. Lily has always been shy and introverted. She's terrible at speaking in front of others and used to hide behind her mother at family gatherings. While the other grandchildren were sociable and often asked for toys or games, Lily kept to herself. In a family full of outgoing personalities, her quiet nature always stood out to me. That's why, even when my wife disapproved, I couldn't help but give Lily extra attention. This year, Lily finally became a working adult. When she landed her job, the whole family celebrated her milestone. Unfortunately, her new life didn't start smoothly. Lily told me everything after returning home from her company's entrance ceremony. Lily's employer was a company in the welfare industry. It operated paid nursing homes, group homes, and provided in-home care services. At the company, Lily was hired as a welfare service worker. For Lily, who struggled with interpersonal communication, the job search process had been nothing short of torturous. Whenever she felt even the slightest pressure from the other party, she would freeze, unable to find her words. She had lost count of how many rejection notices she had received. However, during one particular interview, she somehow managed to express herself without stumbling. It was likely thanks to the interviewer, who listened attentively and made her feel at ease. Indeed, luck often played a role in job interviews, depending on the demeanor of the interviewer. Eventually, Lily passed the only interview where she could speak comfortably and was offered a position. But her hopes soon turned to disappointment. The cause was an incident at a social gathering for new hires. Before the official entrance ceremony, the gathering was intended to help the new employees build rapport. But it was there that Lily caught the attention of Alex, the HR officer in charge of training new employees. As the organizer of the event, Alex stood before the new hires and began to speak. "All right, everyone, may I have your attention? My name is Alex, and I'm the HR officer responsible for new employee training. Think of me as the organizer of this little gathering. If you have any problems, feel free to come to me. Now then, let me start by saying congratulations on your job offers." The other new hires around Lily responded with words of gratitude, prompting her to hurriedly bow and thanks as well. Alex seemed pleased with the reaction and continued. "Okay, let's get to know each other better. After all, you're going to be colleagues. Let's do some introductions: your name, school background, motivation for joining the company, and anything else you'd like to add. Let's start with the person over there." The first person he pointed to looked visibly nervous, but Lily was even more anxious. Introducing herself in front of strangers. For Lily, this was an enormous hurdle. However, it was an unavoidable step as she embarked on her new life. Recalling the practice she had done for interviews, Lily mustered her courage. Finally, it was her turn. "My name is Lily. I hold a high school equivalency certificate. I want to gain skills and experience here to become someone who can help others in need. I may cause some trouble at times, but I look forward to working with all of you." As Lily finished her trembling introduction and bowed, the room erupted in applause. She had somehow managed to do it just like everyone else. Relieved, Lily lifted her head and was about to take her seat, but one person wouldn't let her. It was Alex from the HR department. "Wait a moment, Lily. May I ask you something?" With a mischievous grin, he continued. "A high school equivalency certificate? Does that mean you didn't graduate from high school?" "Yes. I dropped out," Lily replied hesitantly. Her hesitation was understandable. Lily had been unable to attend school during her high school years due to severe bullying by her classmates. After spending some time being at home due to school refusal, she eventually decided to leave school entirely. Although her grades were not poor, and both the school and her teachers encouraged her to transfer to another high school. Lily refused. Her painful experiences had left her fearful of any environment filled with people her age. After dropping out, she studied independently and passed the high school equivalency exam. Despite struggling through the job search process, she had finally secured a position. But Alex, unaware of Lily's past, continued to press her mercilessly. "Oh, so you dropped out of high school? What a waste, getting in and then quitting. Why did you drop out?" "Well, that's... I see. It must be something you can't talk about. Did you get expelled for causing trouble?" "Lily, you've got a wild side, huh?" "No, that's not true. I left voluntarily because of, family circumstances." Blushing with embarrassment and anxiety, Lily denied his accusations. Alex nodded knowingly, as if satisfied with her reaction. I see. Family circumstances, huh? Well, that can't be helped. Sorry for prying. Now then, could you redo your introduction?" "Huh? What do you mean? Did you forget?" "Name, school background, motivation. You skipped your school background earlier. So, let's try again. What was the last school you graduated from? What middle school did you attend?" With a smirk, Alex forced Lily to redo her introduction. Everyone at the gathering turned their eyes toward her. Lily, trembling uncontrollably, had no choice but to comply with Alex's demand. "I'm Lily. I'm from Seaside Middle School. Nice to meet you." When Lily managed to utter her final words, Alex clapped theatrically and egged on the other new hires to applaud as well. After that, the atmosphere during the gathering changed, and Lily was treated like someone to be avoided. The experience brought back memories of the hell she had endured in high school. It left her utterly crushed. But she chose not to share it with her family. She couldn't bear to disappoint them, especially after they had celebrated her job offer with so much joy. Then came the day of the entrance ceremony. Following the ceremony, a group training session for all new employees was scheduled. There was no doubt Alex, the HR trainer, would be there. Remembering the incident at the gathering, Lily felt a heavy weight in her chest. But skipping the ceremony on her first day at the company was out of the question. That morning, her entire family came out to see her off. "Lily, congratulations on starting your new job. If anything unpleasant happens, tell me right away, okay? No matter what, I'm always on your side." "Thanks, Grandpa. But I'll be fine. Well, I'm off now." Encouraging herself with a quiet I'll be fine, Lily headed to the entrance ceremony. When she arrived at the venue, she saw many other new hires milling about nervously. Among the faces, she spotted some from the gathering that day. It appeared that after checking in and receiving their name tags, they were directed to take their assigned seats. Lily joined the line for check-in, feeling tense, and gave her name to a young staff member who seemed to be part of HR. The staff member smiled warmly. "Congratulations," they said before searching through the pile of name tags for Lily's. But no matter how much they searched, Lily's name tag couldn't be found. The staffer repeatedly asked for her name and cross-checked the employee list, drawing attention from others in the process. As someone who hated being the center of attention, Lily stood frozen in discomfort. Then, from the crowd, the last person she wanted to see appeared. It was Alex from HR. Well, isn't it Lily? Is something wrong?" "Yes. They can't seem to find my name tag." "Oh, that's right. I completely forgot. I have your name tag with me. I kept it to give it to you personally. Sorry for the surprise." Alex beckoned Lily to step behind the reception desk. From his pocket, he pulled out a name tag and handed it to her. Suspicious of his behavior but not wanting to appear rude, Lily accepted the name tag and thanked him. "Thank you. Wait, what is this? The moment she looked at it, she was speechless. The name tag Alex handed her didn't have her name on it. It read, middle school graduate. As Lily stared in shock, Alex, clearly pleased with her reaction, sneered. That's good enough for you, isn't it? You should be grateful I made a name tag for a middle school grad like you. If you don't like it, just go home. Humiliated and overwhelmed, Lily ran out of the ceremony venue without looking back. She made it home barely 5 minutes after arriving at the ceremony. When she returned, she came straight to my room and tearfully told me everything about what had happened at the gathering and the entrance ceremony. Only my name tag is just like this. With trembling hands, Lily handed me the name tag that said middle school graduate and broke down crying right there. You did well to endure it, Lily. Leave the rest to me. I placed my hand gently on Lily's head as she lay on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, and spoke to her softly. It seemed it would take some time for her to calm down. I called my wife to take care of Lily, then had one of my subordinates bring the car around and headed straight to the entrance ceremony venue. Though I was stopped at the reception desk, I pushed past them and stormed into the venue. The ceremony was in progress, but I didn't care. I shouted at the top of my lungs, Alex! Come out here right now! The room fell silent for a moment, followed by a wave of murmurs. Through the crowd, a man walked toward me. This must be Alex. He had an untrustworthy face that practically screamed suspicious. I am Alex. And who might you be? If you're here to cause trouble, I'll call the police. Did you make this? Ignoring Alex's question, I held out the name tag. Alex looked at it and nodded as if everything made sense. Oh, I see now. You must be Lily's family. That name tag must have been handed to her by mistake. It's probably just someone's prank. Honestly, these young folks today are so fragile, running to their families over something like this. You think you can dismiss this as just a prank? Come on, calm down. If she's going to crumble over something this minor, she'll never survive in the working world. I'll make sure she gets her proper name tag. Tell her to come back here. Now, if you'll excuse me. At that moment, I swear I heard the sound of my patience snapping. This guy wasn't getting away with this. As Alex turned his back on me and started to walk away, I spoke quietly. Call the board. You're all fired. Huh? What are you saying? Are you senile or something? I still haven't answered your first question, kid. My name is Henry Grant. I run your parent company. Let me make this clear, it wasn't an empty bluff. I've spent decades in the welfare industry and currently oversee multiple companies as their CEO. The company Lily joined happens to be one of my subsidiaries. Out of respect for Lily's wish to secure a job on her own, I had stayed out of her job hunt. But this harassment? That was a different story. Intervening in subsidiary affairs is something I can easily do. As soon as I introduced myself, the executives seated at the VIP section began to stir. Alex, who initially didn't believe me, grew pale as he saw his superiors panic. Wait. You're joking, right? You're the CEO of the parent company? That can't be. Alex. What are you doing? Apologize to this man immediately. A flustered older man from the VIP section rushed over to Alex, berating him. I recognized him. It was George, an executive at the subsidiary. Judging by his attitude toward Alex, they were likely father and son. George, is this your son? Yes, Mr. Grant. I deeply apologize for the trouble he's caused. He's an unworthy child, and I ask for your forgiveness. George, visibly terrified, bowed deeply and forced Alex to bow as well. His hand pressed firmly on the back of his son's head as both apologized profusely. George, take a look at this. My granddaughter left for her entrance ceremony and came back with this. How would you feel if your daughter was treated this way? Would an apology be enough for you? This is unthinkable. Alex did this? My son. I've also heard that during the social gathering, Alex relentlessly questioned my granddaughter about her academic background. It's true she dropped out of high school, but our company policy treats high school equivalency as equivalent to a high school diploma. Isn't that correct? I paused for a moment, sweeping my gaze across the room, glaring at everyone, before continuing. My granddaughter was hired under the same conditions as those with high school diplomas. Yet, at the entrance ceremony, she was handed this tasteless name tag. A company that allows employees to harass young hires unchecked is, frankly, rotten to the core. You'd better look forward to the next personnel reassignment order. As I glared at George and his son, the other executives began to gather around as well. It seemed they had realized this incident might have consequences for them too, and they were eager to address it. Even the new hires attending the ceremony were watching the situation unfold. The ceremony itself had already become a secondary concern. Turning to the gathered executives, I addressed them firmly. I trust you all heard me. Alex here is unfit to remain in this company. He has demeaned my granddaughter's academic background and created this vulgar name tag. I held up the offensive name tag for everyone to see. A low murmur spread through the crowd as they took in the sight. It seemed the executives were eager to distance themselves, insisting they had no part in Alex's actions. Even so, allowing Alex's behavior to go unchecked makes them complicit. Today, my granddaughter happened to be the target. But what if it had been other employees? Would you have listened to them the same way? Or would you have swept it under the rug because the perpetrator was an executive's son? That's not. You can't deny the possibility. Moving forward, I will personally investigate whether there are other employees who've been harassed. Based on those findings, I'll decide how to handle Alex and anyone else involved. That's all. I informed the gathered executives of my intentions and prepared to leave the venue. As I turned to go, a voice from one of the new hires rose up in the hall. Excuse me. Mr. Grant, I have something I need to tell you. Ha? You are. Alex, slumped next to his father, reacted sharply upon seeing the young female employee who had spoken up. Sensing this was something Alex didn't want revealed, I decided to listen. Sure enough, the woman exposed more of Alex's disgraceful behavior. She recounted how, during the new hire gathering, Alex had asked her inappropriate personal questions about her measurements and touched her inappropriately. Later, he had tried to invite her out for drinks, but she declined out of fear. Then Alex had threatened her, saying, "I'm the son of an executive. If you cross me, you'll regret it." Luckily, another new hire happened to show up at the right moment, preventing the situation from escalating further. However, the woman had carried her unease into the entrance ceremony. Damn it, that woman. I told her not to tell anyone. Alex, what have you done? It seems my granddaughter wasn't Alex's only victim, I said firmly. I'll be conducting a thorough investigation of all employees, including new hires. I'll leave one of my subordinates here to ensure no one intimidates the staff or tampers with evidence. Anyone caught covering this up will be fired immediately. With that, I finally left the entrance ceremony venue and returned home. Later, I heard that the situation spiraled into complete chaos. More victims of Alex's harassment came forward, and at one point, George and Alex even got into a physical altercation. As promised, I conducted a thorough investigation, interviewing employees to uncover the truth. The results were damning, and I took decisive action against Alex and others at the subsidiary. First, Alex, the main culprit who had hurt Lily, was fired. It turned out that, beyond the woman who had spoken up during the ceremony, numerous other women had suffered similar harassment at his hands. Using his status as the son of an executive, Alex had repeatedly targeted female colleagues and subordinates, behaving as he pleased without fear of consequences. The reports from multiple victims left his father, George, unable to shield him any longer. Ultimately, George himself was also dismissed from the company. It wasn't just Alex who faced consequences following the investigation. The inquiry revealed cases of harassment and abuse of power by other employees, particularly toward younger staff members. Several employees were reassigned or faced salary reductions. A few individuals were also removed from their executive positions. In the wake of this large-scale personnel shakeup, I sent trusted subordinates to the subsidiary to take over key roles. This was part of a deliberate effort to remove the corrupt elements and bring in fresh leadership, with the goal of revitalizing the company. I'm confident that my subordinates will transform the subsidiary into a more transparent and supportive workplace. As for Alex, he had been engaged to a woman introduced to him by his father. However, the exposure of his malicious harassment toward female employees caused the engagement to be called off. Having lost both his job and his fiancée, Alex now reportedly spends his nights indulging in aimless partying and heavy drinking. His initial employment at our subsidiary had been secured solely through his father's connections. Having never gone through a proper job search, it's doubtful that Alex will be able to find a new position on his own. He will likely end up living off his aging father for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, I continue to work energetically as always. The day I barged into the subsidiary without an appointment earned me a severe scolding from my subordinates. However, I suspect I avoided being pushed into retirement because this incident was for none other than my granddaughter, Lily. Everyone in my company knows how much I dote on my granddaughter. When I explained the full extent of my actions, even the executives who initially criticized my outburst understood and shared in my indignation. Some of the senior staff who had known Lily since she was little were so outraged that they said things like, "Should we just shut down that subsidiary?" As for Lily, she has been going to work every day since the entrance ceremony. The family urged her to take a break, worried about her well-being, but Lily firmly refused, leaving the house each morning with cheerful energy. Concerned that she might be pushing herself too hard, I couldn't help but make a suggestion. "Lily, isn't it difficult for you to stay at the company after the scene I caused? If you'd like, why don't you come work for my company instead?" "No, Grandpa, I'm fine. I'll keep working at my current company. Thanks to you, the bad managers are gone, and everyone's happy about it." Apparently, the women who had suffered harassment from Alex were incredibly grateful to Lily. Whenever Lily finds herself the target of curious or judgmental stares, those women always step in to shield her. Thanks to their support, Lily has been able to avoid isolation at work and focus on her responsibilities. That's great to hear. It's reassuring to know they're looking out for you, I said, relieved, but to my surprise, Lily shook her head. Then, with a serious expression, she looked at me and said, "I've always relied on others to protect me, whether it was you, my friends, or my coworkers. But I can't keep depending on others. I need to learn to protect myself. If I don't, I'll just keep running away like I did in high school." "Lily, you are. That's why I'm going to become a stronger person, strong enough that my family can feel at ease watching over me. So, Grandpa, keep watching me. Okay?" With that, she hurriedly finished getting ready for work, as if to hide her embarrassment, and left the house with a radiant smile. As I watched her retreating figure, I felt my eyes well up with pride and emotion. I placed a separate order just for you. I mean, there's no way you'd enjoy gourmet food, right? This should be enough for someone like you. At the middle school reunion venue, while everyone else was handed visibly expensive lunches, what was placed in front of me was a simple packed lunch. The kind you'd find at a convenience store. The elite classmate, now working at a major corporation and responsible for arranging the food, looked down at me with a mocking grin. It was true, I had been poor. So poor that I couldn't even attend high school, ending up working at a factory after graduating middle school. But now, just then, a stunningly beautiful woman appeared at the entrance to the hall. She walked straight toward me and said, "President Smith, are you pretending to be ordinary?" Her words left my former classmates speechless. No way. Is that company really the one everyone's heard of? My name is Gabriel Smith. While preparing for tomorrow's lessons in a classroom of the Starlight Academy, I was lost in memories of those distant days. Gabriel, you will absolutely get into a top university. I still vividly remember the words of my junior high school teacher, Mr. Miller. But for me, those words felt like a burden. We had no money. Though my parents worked tirelessly, even attending high school seemed impossible. "I'm sorry, Gabriel." My father's trembling voice. My mother's tears. I smiled and answered, "It's okay. I'll work and study at the same time." After graduating middle school, I started working in a factory. At night, I kept studying on my own. But reality was far from kind. A year after I started working, my parents were taken from me in a traffic accident. I felt like I had lost everything. My home, my hope, my future. Escaping from reality, I began spending every day at the library. In books, I could go anywhere. I could become anyone. That's what I believed. One quiet afternoon. As usual, I was buried in my books when an elderly gentleman quietly took a seat next to me. The gentleman spoke to me in a soft voice. "Excuse me, would it bother you if we had a little chat?" Startled by his gentle tone, I lifted my head from the book I had been immersed in. The elderly gentleman sitting before me wore a gentle smile. He was impeccably dressed in a well-tailored suit, his silver-streaked hair neatly combed. There was an air of dignity about him. Though a little unsure, I softly replied, "Yes. I see you here often. It seems like you're always studying," he said with a kind smile, almost in a whisper. His words made me tense up slightly. Yet, the kindness in his eyes gradually eased my wariness. "Yes, you could say it's just to pass the time." "Is that so?" "Well, it's wonderful to see young people spending their time in a library. If you don't mind me asking, what kind of books are you reading?" I glanced down at the book in my hands. It was a university-level mathematics textbook. Impressive. For someone your age to tackle such advanced material. "Would you mind telling me a bit about what interests you?" His gentle curiosity encouraged me to open up. I started speaking quietly, sharing how much I enjoyed studying, how circumstances had kept me from attending high school or college, but how I couldn't give up and continued learning on my own. The elderly gentleman listened intently, his expression serious. When I finished, he spoke calmly yet firmly. "If you love studying that much, why not turn it into your profession?" His words caught me off guard, my eyes widening. "But I don't have the education." "Aren't you frustrated about not being able to pursue your education?" I was at a loss for words. He smiled gently. "If you're frustrated, then rise above it. You have talent. Don't let it go to waste." Those words changed my life. The days that followed were nothing short of a battle. I worked during the day and studied at night. I sacrificed sleep to attend a correspondence high school. Eventually, I earned the equivalent of a college degree. Even if you're born into difficult circumstances, you can make a comeback if you put your heart into studying. With that conviction, I set out to create a small prep school. In the beginning, it was just a rented room in an apartment. The desk was something I found at a second-hand shop, and the chairs were all gifts from acquaintances. Only the blackboard was brand new. It was my one indulgence. There were many days when no students came. I handed out flyers around the neighborhood. I tried calling out to people on the street, only to be rejected time and again. This went on for months. I thought about giving up. But in those moments, I would remember the image of that elderly gentleman. That's right, I have thoughts I want to convey. The next day, I changed my approach. First, I designed a unique curriculum based on my own experiences. Under the theme, Turning Your Life Around from Rock Bottom, I included not only study techniques but also emotional support. Next, I started offering free trial lessons. I rented a community center and held study sessions open to everyone. There, I shared my story and the joy of learning. Studying has the power to change your life. I'm sure my eyes were shining as I spoke. Slowly, word began to spread. Mr. Smith's lessons are so easy to understand. Thanks to Mr. Smith, I've started to enjoy studying. One student, then another, began to join. But it wasn't enough. I wanted to reach even more people. With that thought driving me, I stayed up late into the night, researching and refining my teaching materials. I created personalized study plans for each student, held regular one-on-one meetings to track their progress, and sacrificed weekends for extra lessons. During exam season, I worked through the night answering questions. The smiles of my students warmed my heart. For those smiles, no amount of effort felt like too much. Mr. Smith, I got into my first choice school. Every time I heard such news, my chest tightened with emotion. The dreams I'd poured my life into were clearly changing someone else's future. Before I knew it, Starlight Academy had become one of the most well-regarded prep schools in the area. From a single apartment room, it had grown into a small but independent campus. But I couldn't be satisfied with just this. There were still so many lives I wanted to touch, so many lessons I wanted to share. Fueled by that passion, I kept pushing forward with everything I had. Then, one day, I received an invitation to a middle school reunion. Honestly, I didn't want to go. But I had always told my students about the importance of facing the past. I can't just run away from this. Telling myself this, I stepped into the venue. Well, if it isn't Gabriel. Hearing a familiar voice, I turned around to see Michael, a classmate from back then. He'd been the class genius and now worked for a major publishing company. It's been a while. I greeted him. Michael responded with a condescending snort. Wow, you actually came. I figured you'd be too busy to make it, since poor people never have any time to spare. Well, I made time. I replied, keeping my composure. Michael gave me a once-over, smirking. Humph, same as always. There was clear disdain in his eyes. Back in middle school, while my grades had been good, my family's poverty made me painfully aware of how out of place I was. Michael and his group had loved mocking me for it. I especially remembered what happened during the school trip. Hey, Gabriel, aren't you going to buy any souvenirs? Everyone else is. Michael had pointed at me with a mocking grin. His cronies burst out laughing in unison. Maybe Gabriel doesn't even get allowance money? It was probably hard enough for him to scrape together the travel fee. The cruel words came at me one after another. All I could do was silently endure. But it didn't end there. That night, while I was in the bath, they rifled through my belongings and found my wallet. Inside was only $10. It was my hard-earned allowance, saved with great effort. The next morning, I found my wallet back in my bag, completely empty. In place of my money, what they had left behind was a wooden bear carving, something utterly impractical and mocking. Hey, we bought you a souvenir instead. You should be grateful, right? Michael and his friends spoke as though they had done me a favor. I couldn't bring myself to tell the teacher. All I could do was swallow my frustration. When they found out I couldn't go to high school, their ridicule only intensified. So, Gabriel, you're going to work at a factory, huh? Yeah, that suits you. You're smart, but it's a shame. Still, this is just the reality, isn't it? Every time they said something like that, I clenched my teeth. But I lacked both the courage to argue back and the power to change my circumstances. And now, I'll distribute the lunchboxes. These were arranged by Michael. Ryan, the reunion organizer, announced, snapping me back to the present. The lunchboxes being handed out were visibly luxurious. The lacquered boxes were decorated with intricate designs and packed with high-quality ingredients. Wow, as expected. This is going to be amazing. Excited murmurs filled the room. Then Ryan approached me, his expression clouded with confusion. Ryan had a puzzled expression on his face. The lunchbox with my name on it was clearly different from the others. Gabriel's lunch is this one, I think. What he handed me was a cheap, plastic convenience store lunchbox. When I opened it, I found a simple dried seaweed and rice lunch inside. The room fell silent. Ryan glanced uneasily at Michael. Oh, yeah, I made a special order just for Gabriel. I mean, there's no way he'd appreciate gourmet food, right? This is plenty for a poor guy like him. Isn't that right, Gabriel? All eyes turned toward me, some filled with pity, others with faint amusement. I took a deep breath and forced myself to appear calm. Yeah, thanks. This is more than enough for me, I replied, picking up the lunchbox. Michael's mocking gaze bore into me. Of course. That's just like you, Gabriel. At those words, soft chuckles could be heard here and there across the venue. I sat down quietly and opened the box. Seaweed, a rolled omelet, a few meatballs. It was simple, but the familiar aroma stirred something nostalgic. Thank you for the food, I murmured under my breath and picked up my chopsticks. That's when it happened. Excuse me, is Gabriel here? A resolute voice rang through the hall. I turned to see a woman standing at the entrance. Her long black hair swayed gently, and her poised demeanor exuded confidence. It was as though the air around her shimmered with light. The room fell into a hushed silence. The men's gazes locked onto her, as though drawn by an invisible force. Michael was quick to his feet, striding over to her. I'm Michael. And you are? I'm Kimberly Kendrick. I'd like to speak with Gabriel. Oh, Gabriel? He's over there eating his seaweed. But Kimberly, what business could you possibly have with someone like him? Michael shot me a contemptuous look. Come on, Kimberly, why don't you stop and chat with us? No, with me. The men around also scrambled to get closer to Kimberly. I'm sorry, but I only have business with Gabriel. As the venue grew noisy, Kimberly's clear and dignified voice echoed through the room, and she walked straight toward me. When her eyes landed on the boxed lunch in front of me, her expression shifted. President Smith, are you imitating commoners now? I drew in a sharp breath at her words. Every gaze in the room turned to us simultaneously. Kimberly continued, looking at me with a mix of exasperation and concern. Please stop pretending to understand how ordinary people feel by mimicking their ways. Even here, of all places. The entire room fell silent at her words. Faces, including Michael's, twisted in shock and confusion. President Smith? Michael managed to croak out. At that moment, Kimberly cleared her throat lightly and stepped to the center of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce you properly. This is Gabriel Smith, founder and CEO of Starlight Academy, a nationally recognized educational company. Kimberly's voice resounded throughout the venue. The entire room froze in stunned silence. You've got to be kidding me. Starlight, as in that famous one? Michael's face drained of color. His eyes widened, and his mouth opened and closed soundlessly, no words coming out. Starlight, the one with those TV commercials? Didn't it go public last year on the New York Stock Exchange? My son attends their school. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd. Michael looked back and forth between me and Kimberly, clearly struggling to grasp reality. Mr. Smith, we have an urgent meeting. You need to return to headquarters immediately. I nodded slightly and stood up. All eyes seemed magnetically drawn to me. I'm sorry, everyone. I'd love to stay and reminisce, but duty calls. I must take my leave, I said calmly but firmly. Wait a minute. Are you really? Without responding, I gave a slight bow alongside Kimberly, and we exited the venue. The car sped through the city night. Kimberly was behind the wheel. I sat in the passenger seat, gazing out the window, replaying the events of the evening in my mind. After a long silence, I finally broke it. Hey, Kimberly. That urgent meeting, that was a lie, wasn't it? She glanced at me briefly, then smiled softly. Impressive. You saw right through it. Why would you do that? I remember you once told me about your past during a night out drinking. Her words made me stiffen slightly. I recalled that I had indeed confided in her. On the night I achieved a major success at work, I couldn't help but share stories from the past. You told me about your middle school classmates and how much they had tormented you. What they did was awful. But what they tried to pull today was no better. Her voice carried a faint edge of anger. I let out a deep sigh. After a brief silence, I quietly began to speak. This reunion. I made up my mind to attend. It's been years, and I thought it was time to let go. To accept the past as it is and move forward. But I guess it was still too soon for me. I'm really glad you came, Kimberly. Thank you. I turned toward her and smiled. Kimberly looked surprised for a moment but quickly returned to her gentle smile. Of course. After all, you've helped me so much, Mr. Smith. Her words brought back old memories. It was about 5 years ago. Back when Starlight Learning Center was just a small, privately run tutoring school. That day, a young woman came in for an interview. That was my first encounter with Kimberly. I saw the job posting for a part-time position. My name is Kimberly. She greeted politely, but her somewhat hesitant demeanor caught my attention. As the interview progressed, her background astonished me. She had graduated from a top-tier university and had previously worked full-time at a major prep school. Why would you want to work at a small place like this? Unable to stop myself, I asked, and Kimberly replied while looking down. The truth is, I was let go from my last school. Her words made me furrow my brow. The students said my lessons were hard to follow. No matter how much I tried to teach, I couldn't get through to them. I lost my confidence. But I still love teaching. So, her voice trembled as she spoke. In that moment, I saw a reflection of my younger self in her. The pain of failure paired with an unshakable passion to continue. Got it. You're hired. I smiled as I said it. Kimberly looked shocked. Honestly, we're short-staffed right now. I'd even welcome help from a cat if I could. Don't worry. There's a knack to making lessons easy to understand. I'll teach you, so let's work hard together. I placed a hand on her shoulder. I could see a glimmer of hope return to her eyes. The next day, in an empty classroom, I began training her. Let's start with the basics. What do you think is the most important thing for making lessons easy to understand? Accurate knowledge and clear explanations? Those are important, but there's something even more crucial, putting yourself in the student's shoes. I smiled as I explained. Kimberly tilted her head slightly in confusion. For example, have you ever looked at a problem in a workbook and thought, this is easy? She nodded, a little embarrassed. But that's what's obvious to you. For the students, it might not be obvious at all. Your obvious isn't theirs. Always keep that in mind. I wrote those words boldly on the blackboard with chalk as I continued. Think from the student's perspective. If I were seeing this problem for the first time, what would I not understand? Start from there and explain carefully, step by step. Don't rush or skip steps. Kimberly's eyes began to light up with understanding. I wrote a simple equation on the board. Now, how would you teach this? She hesitated for a moment but slowly began explaining. Whenever she stumbled, I offered hints. Together, we worked through the problem, piece by piece. Yes, that's it. But pay closer attention to the students' reactions. If they look confused, try explaining it in a different way. Putting yourself in their shoes is the first step to becoming a great teacher. Kimberly nodded with a determined expression. We stayed late into the night, discussing everything. Teaching techniques, how to connect with students, ways to motivate them. Finally, as we wrapped up, I said to her, "The most important thing," I had told her, "is for you to enjoy teaching. That feeling will always come through to your students." Determination filled Kimberly's eyes. "Yes. I'll do my best." Over the next few months, Kimberly grew at an astonishing pace. At first, she struggled. There were moments of confusion and setbacks. But she never gave up. She reviewed each lesson, carefully observed her students' reactions, and constantly worked on improving her teaching methods. Miss Kendrick's lessons are so much easier to understand now. I can finally get even the tough problems when Ms. Kendrick explains them. The students' feedback quickly turned positive. By the time 6 months had passed, her classes were always full. "Mr. Smith, can we add more classes for Ms. Kendrick? We're overwhelmed with applications." Reports like these became common from my staff. A year later, Kimberly had become the star instructor of Starlight Learning Center. Her lessons didn't just make the material easier to understand, they inspired her students to learn. By her second year, Kimberly was proposing and implementing new curriculums on her own. Her motivation enhancement program dramatically boosted students' drive to study, further enhancing the reputation of Starlight Learning Center. Today, Kimberly is indispensable to our school. Her presence has become one of our greatest strengths. Reflecting on her journey, I spoke quietly as we sat in the car. "Kimberly, your growth has been nothing short of remarkable. You're now the cornerstone of our school. It's all thanks to you. Back then, you reached out to me." Kimberly smiled shyly. A brief silence filled the car. "You taught me how to put myself in others' shoes. I'm confident I've been able to put that into practice. But the only thing I can't understand are your feelings." Kimberly spoke softly, breaking the silence. Her words made me turn to her, startled. "What do you mean?" Even I could hear the slight tremor in my voice. Kimberly kept her gaze forward, her cheeks faintly flushed. At that moment, the traffic light turned red. She brought the car to a stop. Silence filled the vehicle again. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Slowly, I glanced at her, and she turned her head slightly to look at me. Illuminated by the soft glow of the streetlights, her profile looked inexplicably beautiful. "Mr. Smith, what do you think of me? Not as an employee, but as a woman." "Kimberly." I wanted to say something, but the words caught in my throat. Just then, the sound of a horn blaring behind us broke the moment. The light had turned green. Kimberly quickly started the car, her face slightly flustered. An awkward silence settled over us as the car moved forward. I stared out the window, unsure of what to say. Kimberly seemed lost in thought as well. Eventually, the car pulled up in front of my apartment building. The engine stopped, and a quiet stillness enveloped us. Kimberly let go of the steering wheel and turned to face me. Her eyes reflected the glow of the streetlights outside. "Mr. Smith, I hope you can rest well today." "Ah, thanks for the ride. I really appreciate it." I unbuckled my seatbelt and reached for the door handle. Yet, something held me back, and I found myself unable to open it right away. "Mr. Smith." Kimberly's voice made me turn back instinctively. "Please forget what I said earlier. I may have gotten carried away. You and I are just employer and employee. Thinking beyond that was out of line. I'm sorry. Her words felt like a vice tightening around my chest. But all I could manage was, I see. Take care, and I'll see you tomorrow. Kimberly flashed a bright smile. It was her usual work mode expression. Yeah, thanks. You be careful on your way back too. I stepped out of the car, waving lightly. She returned the wave before her car slowly drove away. As I watched it disappear into the distance, I felt my heart pounding. Walking toward the entrance of my apartment building, I replayed our conversation over and over in my mind. The night breeze gently brushed my cheek. Its chill only emphasized the warmth on my face. A few days later, the summer sun poured through the office windows. Inside, the air-conditioned room felt like a haven compared to the blazing heat outside. I sat back deeply in my chair, staring at the documents spread out before me. Starlight Academy had undoubtedly become a success. In the 10 years since its founding, it had grown to include 15 locations across the city, with a steadily increasing number of students. But the latest management report revealed some concerning trends. The growth rate of new enrollments was starting to slow. The attrition rate was creeping upward, albeit slightly. Declining birth rates, huh? I murmured as I stood and walked to the window. The bustling streets below seemed full of life, vibrant and active. But the statistics painted a harsh reality. The number of children was undeniably decreasing. Mr. Smith, you haven't had lunch yet, have you? I turned to see Kimberly entering the room. Not yet. I gave a tired smile. She took one look at my expression and seemed to understand immediately. Still looking at those reports? I nodded silently. Kimberly stood beside me, gazing out the window as well. At this rate, we're bound to hit a ceiling eventually. Just as Kimberly finished speaking, my phone rang. The caller ID showed it was from reception. A man named Michael is here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says he has a revolutionary idea for transforming the education industry. Michael? I was a bit surprised. At the same time, the challenges we were facing as a business flashed through my mind. All right. Show him to the conference room in 15 minutes. After hanging up, I turned to Kimberly. Michael is here. An old classmate of mine. That man. What does he want? I don't know. But considering our current situation, it might be worth exploring any possibility. Let's at least hear him out. Kimberly nodded, though her expression was tinged with unease. 15 minutes later, in the meeting room, Kimberly and I welcomed Michael. Michael bowed deeply and greeted us politely. Mr. Smith, I apologize for dropping in unannounced. I actually have a proposal that might contribute to the future of your organization. Michael pulled some documents out of his bag and handed them to us. This is an online learning system. It uses a custom tablet equipped with the latest AI technology to provide optimal exercises tailored to each student's progress. With this, you can expand your student base without adding more facilities, and even extend your reach to rural areas. It could also address the declining birth rate issue. While the initial implementation cost is significant, I'm confident it will yield substantial long-term benefits. His words piqued my interest. This is certainly an intriguing idea. However, the issue is our budget. Making such an investment immediately. I completely understand it's a big decision. Michael nodded in understanding, then pulled out a business card holder from his bag and handed a card to both Kimberly and me. My contact information is here. Please take your time to consider, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Michael bowed politely again and added, "Thank you for taking the time to meet with me," before standing to leave. I stood as well, seeing him off at the door. Once the door closed, I turned to Kimberly, visibly excited. What do you think, Kimberly? Isn't this a fascinating proposal? The initial cost is steep, but in the long run, It might transform the future of our school. Kimberly listened silently as I spoke enthusiastically. Her expression, however, revealed a hint of something unspoken. A slight furrow appeared between her brows, and her gaze was directed downward. "What's wrong? Is there something bothering you?" Kimberly looked up, startled, and quickly forced a smile. But there was a shadow in that smile, something that felt out of place. "No, it's nothing. If you're this enthusiastic, Mr. Smith, it must be a good idea." She shook her head lightly. I tilted my head in confusion. There was a clear sense of unease in Kimberly's demeanor. However, sensing she didn't want to discuss it further, I decided not to press the matter. "All right, let's start drafting a concrete implementation plan. Budget adjustments will be necessary, too." Kimberly simply nodded, but her eyes carried a deep, contemplative look. Days passed. While I continued to consider Michael's proposal, Kimberly's behavior seemed off. At a morning meeting. "Good morning, Kimberly." "Good morning." I greeted her warmly, but her response was curt. The usual warmth in her tone was absent. She avoided making eye contact. "About today's agenda, regarding Michael's proposal. I'm sorry, Mr. Smith. I have other urgent tasks to attend to." With that, Kimberly grabbed her materials and left the meeting room. I stood there, staring after her in bewilderment. This had never happened before. We had always exchanged ideas passionately and worked together closely. Later at lunch, I spotted Kimberly in the cafeteria. "Kimberly, would you like to eat together?" I called out, but she looked at me apologetically. "Sorry, I have another appointment." She left quickly. I sat alone, staring at my cooling meal, feeling an unfamiliar emptiness settle in my chest. In the evening, feeling it might be my last chance, I walked over to Kimberly's desk. "Kimberly, do you have some time to talk after work today?" "I'm sorry. I'll be leaving early today," she said, not meeting my eyes as she quickly began packing her belongings. "Kimberly, is something wrong?" At my question, her hands paused briefly. But she resumed just as quickly, replying, "No, nothing at all," before walking away. The sound of the door closing felt like a heavy gate shutting inside my heart. Why? Did I do something wrong? With no answers in sight, I stood by the office window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. I never imagined the growing distance between Kimberly and me would hurt this much. One afternoon, I decided to call Kimberly to discuss a new project. As I approached her desk, I overheard her on the phone. "Yes, Michael. I've received the materials. I'll review them. But as for Mr. Smith..." I stopped in my tracks. Michael? Why was Kimberly speaking with Michael? Just then, Kimberly noticed me. I saw the color drain from her face. "Oh, excuse me. I'll call you back later." Kimberly hastily ended the call. I was at a loss for words. "Mr. Smith, this is..." Kimberly began, but I wasn't in the mood to listen. "Why? Why are you in direct contact with Michael? Without consulting me?" My voice trembled. Kimberly looked down, unable to answer. A sharp, indescribable pain pierced my chest. The thought of someone I trusted deeply going behind my back to contact Michael was unbearable. And she had kept it from me. "Please explain, Kimberly." My voice was cold. But beneath that coldness lay a deep layer of disappointment and sadness. She lifted her head and met my gaze. Her eyes were filled with a mix of guilt and resolve. "I'm sorry." And with that, she walked away. I felt something crumble inside me. Years of trust, built brick by brick, seemed to waver and collapse in an instant. The atmosphere in the office grew heavy and cold. It felt as though an invisible wall had risen between Kimberly and me. Before I realized it, my feet had taken me to a familiar place. A library where I had once sought refuge during a time when I thought I had lost everything. I pushed open the heavy doors and stepped inside. The silence enveloped me. The faint smell of books tickled my nose with a sense of nostalgia. I sank into a secluded seat and let out a deep sigh. Why? Why would Kimberly? The same question echoed in my mind, over and over. The pain of feeling betrayed by someone I had trusted. When I closed my eyes, the scenes from that day came flooding back vividly. I had lost my parents and all sense of hope. Then, an elderly gentleman approached me, his voice steady and kind. "If you're frustrated, then all you need to do is rise up." Those words have stayed with me to this day. That's right. Back then, I managed to climb back up. I can overcome this too. When I opened my eyes, the sight of the surrounding bookshelves greeted me. I remembered the days I had spent here, desperately studying and forging my future. Standing up, I headed to the shelves lined with books on management. Perhaps there was a hint hidden here that could help me break through this situation. As I reached for a book, a thought struck me. Kimberly must have a reason for all this. The moment that thought crossed my mind, memories from the past came rushing back. That conversation in the car after the reunion. Kimberly's serious gaze and trembling voice surfaced in my mind. Those middle school classmates of yours, I heard how much they tormented you. What they did was cruel, and what they did today was no different. Her voice had carried a distinct note of anger. She hadn't tried to hide her strong resentment toward Michael and the others. And then, her words immediately after. "I can't thank you enough, Mr. Smith." Her eyes had been filled with sincerity. Pure gratitude, without a shred of falsehood. It was a testament to the bond we had built as colleagues over the years. That's right. Kimberly cares about me. In the library's silence, I stood frozen with a book in hand. Memories of Kimberly flooded my mind, one after another. Her tireless efforts and steady growth. Her genuine attention to my opinions and her sharp insights. The days when she stood by my side through countless challenges. Kimberly would never betray me. There must be something more to this, something I can't see yet. That conviction grew stronger in my heart. I let out a deep breath. The anger and disappointment I had felt began to ease, little by little. I need to put myself in Kimberly's shoes. If I do that, I'll find the key to resolving this. With that decision made, I returned the book to its place on the shelf. A few days later, in the office at dusk, the sky outside was painted in hues of orange. "Mr. Smith, I'll be heading out now." I turned to see her already holding her bag. "All right. Good work today." I gave a slight nod. Her expression lacked its usual calmness, there was an air of tension about her. As she left the room, I watched her back intently. When the door closed, I let out a heavy sigh. Resolving myself, I took out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Hesitating for a moment, I finally pressed the call button. "This is Gabriel. Do you have a moment?" The truth is, a few hours later, I found myself standing in front of the upscale restaurant, The Heritage. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the heavy wooden door. "Welcome. Excuse me, I'm meeting someone. I believe the reservation is under Kimberly or Michael." The staff member paused to think for a moment before saying, "Ah, yes. Right this way," and began to guide me down a quiet hallway. My heart was pounding as we walked. The staff stopped in front of one of the private rooms. "Here you are." Just as the staff reached to open the door, I heard familiar voices coming from inside. "Tonight is special, isn't it? Just the two of us, in such a lovely place. Michael. Can we stick to business?" Michael's voice was lower than usual, dripping with an unsettling intimacy. In contrast, Kimberly's tone was icy. "Don't rush me. It's a rare opportunity, isn't it? How about a little personal chat first? I came here to discuss business. I have no other purpose." Her voice carried a sharp edge of irritation. Come on. I liked you the moment I saw you. I'm an elite employee at a major publishing house. Meanwhile, Gabriel is a president of a company already hitting its ceiling. You're smart, you know which side you should be on. At that moment, I slammed the door open. Who's hitting their ceiling? My voice echoed through the room. Michael and Kimberly froze in shock. Gabriel! What are you doing here? Michael's voice cracked as he spoke. I stepped into the room, maintaining a calm facade. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Kimberly's conflicted expression, but I focused my attention on Michael. Michael, care to explain? What's going on here? Michael flinched for a moment but quickly adopted a defiant expression. Stay out of this. We're having a business discussion. It's none of your concern. He stood up and strode toward me. A business discussion? That didn't sound like business to me. Shut up. I said it's none of your concern. Get out of here. I stared him down, unflinching. His eyes flickered with a mix of panic and anger. Michael, I see right through your scheme. You pressured Kimberly into agreeing to this private dinner to force her hand on the pricing. Didn't you? I kept my tone steady but firm. Michael's face twitched slightly. That's not true. Are you denying it? I know you pressured her to set up this meeting. And I also know your proposal's pricing is exorbitant. It's obvious when compared to other companies. Kimberly caught on to it immediately. But out of consideration for my interest, she decided to confront you privately instead of bringing it up to me. And you tried to exploit her. Isn't that right? I heard Kimberly gasp softly. Michael faltered briefly but quickly put on a smug expression. Too expensive, you say? Give me a break. Every part of my proposal is justified. Look at this, it's a system built with the latest AI technology. The quality is top-notch. Of course, it's going to cost a bit more. He grabbed the documents from the table and waved them dramatically. And as for pressuring Kimberly? Sure, I suggested having the discussion over dinner at a nice restaurant. But that's all part of the negotiation process. It helps people relax and speak honestly. You, Gabriel, clearly don't understand how business works. This is how adults operate. Getting worked up over a simple dinner? You're so immature. Then again, maybe a guy like you, who's never known luxury, just doesn't get it. Michael's words dripped with arrogance, his final attempt at resistance. The room fell into a heavy silence. Then, the door opened again. My, what a lively negotiation this is. A low, authoritative voice filled the space. All eyes turned to the door. Standing there was an older gentleman, his hair streaked with white and neatly groomed. His commanding presence and deeply lined face spoke of decades of experience. Mr. Irwin? Michael's voice cracked. Mr. Irwin? Ah, that's Keith Irwin. He's the former president and now the chairman of the company where Michael works. Noticing Kimberly's puzzled expression, I explained in a low voice. Mr. Irwin entered the room slowly, his eyes sweeping over everyone present. A heavy silence hung in the air as he let out a deep sigh. Michael, what on earth have you done? His voice carried a profound sense of disappointment. Michael stood frozen, unable to speak. Why are you here, Mr. Irwin? I was contacted by Gabriel regarding your conduct, so I've been investigating your actions. Contacted by Gabriel? Michael's face turned ashen. He turned toward me and yelled. Who the hell are you? How do you know the chairman? His voice was a mix of anger and fear. Before I could answer, Mr. Irwin spoke firmly yet calmly. Michael, Gabriel is a benefactor of our company. What? Mr. Irwin smiled softly as he continued. It was about 15 years ago. Our company was struggling financially. No new hits, ballooning debt, we were on the verge of collapse. Mr. Irwin's eyes softened as if gazing into the distance. In his expression, a sense of nostalgia and gratitude was evident. I found myself wandering into a library, utterly lost. That's where I met a young Gabriel. He was at the library every day, studying tirelessly. His dedication caught my attention. One day, I worked up the courage to speak to him. I was amazed by his depth of knowledge and his ability to explain things so clearly. So, I decided to consult with him about creating a truly useful study guide from a student's perspective. Mr. Irwin turned to me with a gentle smile. I nodded silently. I still vividly remember that day. And would you believe it? The proposal Gabriel created was phenomenal. The study guide we developed based on it became a massive hit. To this day, it remains one of our flagship products. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed his words. Michael's face went pale as a sheet. That's a lie. It has to be a lie. There's no way someone like Gabriel could. Suddenly, Michael raised his voice. His eyes were bloodshot, and his entire body was trembling. Mr. Irwin fixed Michael with a stern gaze, speaking firmly. Michael, I mentioned earlier that I've been looking into you, didn't I? Initially, I thought your tactics were just overly aggressive sales strategies. But the more I uncovered, the more serious the issues became. Michael's complexion grew even paler. First, there's the matter of inflated estimates. You've been quoting prices over twice the standard rate and funneling the surplus into a personal off-the-books account. Then, there's your intimidation tactics, obtaining clients' personal information unlawfully and using it to pressure them into contracts. Furthermore, unauthorized access to the company database revealed that you were stealing leads from other sales representatives. And lastly, the misuse of company funds, claiming overseas business trips that were actually personal vacations, with forged receipts to cover your tracks. Mr. Irwin recited each accusation with a calm, authoritative tone. Michael stood motionless, completely at a loss for words. The air in the room froze as everyone processed the severity of the situation. Mr. Irwin let out another sigh. Michael, your actions go far beyond simple overachievement. This is outright betrayal of the company's trust, potentially criminal behavior. Michael collapsed to his knees. His face was ghostly white, and his entire body trembled. I'm so sorry, so sorry. You're apologizing to the wrong person. Mr. Irwin said coldly, glaring down at him. Michael trembled violently as he prostrated himself before Kimberly and me. I'm truly, deeply sorry. His voice was barely a whisper. Kimberly gave a small nod, and I turned to Mr. Irwin. Mr. Irwin, thank you so much for investigating Michael. Please ensure he faces the proper consequences. Of course. If anything, we should be the ones thanking you. Thanks to you, we've uncovered a rot within our company. Honestly, it's my failure for allowing such behavior to persist under my watch. He let out a deep sigh. But this will serve as a turning point for us. We'll rebuild the company, emphasizing ethical management and truly prioritizing our customers. Gabriel, you've saved us once again. Truly, thank you. Mr. Irwin smiled warmly. Then, as if recalling something, he continued. Oh, by the way, Gabriel. This room is still reserved for a while longer, isn't it? Isn't that right, Michael? Michael, still pale, gave a shaky nod. Mr. Irwin glanced at Kimberly and me. A somewhat meaningful smile played on his face. Take this opportunity to enjoy yourselves. The rest of the evening is yours. For a moment, I was at a loss for words. When I glanced at Kimberly, I noticed her cheeks had turned a soft shade of red. Mr. Irwin stood, placing a firm hand on Michael's shoulder, who was still kneeling and trembling. "Come, Michael. Let's take our leave." Michael staggered to his feet, following Mr. Irwin toward the door. With the sound of the door closing, only Kimberly and I remained in the room. A profound silence filled the air as we locked eyes. After a long pause, Kimberly finally broke the quiet with a soft voice. "Mr. Smith, how did you know that I'd fallen into Michael's trap?" I exhaled deeply, then replied slowly. "It was obvious. You weren't yourself. You didn't act like the Kimberly I know. But I treated you so coldly. You want to know why I still trusted you, don't you?" I was momentarily at a loss for words. I hesitated, unsure of how to express the true reason buried deep in my heart. "It's because I love you, Kimberly. I've always loved you." Summoning all my courage, I continued. Her eyes widened in surprise. "Your dedication to your work, your kindness in supporting each and every student, your resilience in the face of adversity, and above all, your smile. That radiant expression when students finally understand something, it makes me happy just to see it. And your sincerity. Even in this situation, you try to protect the company and the students, putting yourself at risk." I paused, taking a deep breath, before meeting her gaze directly. "Because of you, Starlight Academy has become what it is today. You're not just an employee, you're an irreplaceable partner to me. That's why I want you to keep walking by my side. Not just as my work partner, but as my partner in life." At those words, Kimberly's expression softened into a gentle smile. Her eyes glistened with tears, holding a warm, radiant light. "Mr. Smith, no, Gabriel. I felt the same way about you for a long time. I want to walk this path with you both in work and beyond." Kimberly's voice was quiet, yet it carried a clear sense of conviction. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly, growing brighter and warmer. At that moment, the door opened quietly, and a server entered, carrying an array of luxurious dishes. "Thank you for waiting. Please enjoy your meal." After the server left, Kimberly and I exchanged a smile. "Let's eat." When I said that, Kimberly nodded happily. After all, a Gabriel suits luxurious and delicious dishes like this better, don't you think? Not simple packed lunches. Packed lunches can be delicious too, you know? Oh, Gabriel. But that's what I love about you, how you stay true to yourself no matter how far you climb. Kimberly said that with a gentle smile. Her eyes were filled with kindness and affection. I couldn't help but catch my breath. Her smile made my heart feel like it was glowing from within. "Thank you." That was all I could say. But I was certain that my feelings had been conveyed. Outside the window, the nightscape sparkled, while inside the room, our emotions resonated quietly yet unmistakably. A few days later, as I left the cram school after finishing work, I spotted Michael standing near the entrance, looking defeated. The confident man I had seen at the reunion just days ago was nowhere to be found. His suit was wrinkled, his beard unkempt. "What do you want?" I asked coldly. Michael took a cautious step forward. His eyes were bloodshot. It was clear he hadn't slept much recently. "Gabriel, no, Mr. Smith. I've lost everything. I got fired, and now I've been blacklisted from the industry. But it's my own fault, I know that." Michael's voice trembled. The arrogance he once had was nowhere to be found. "I'm so sorry for what I did to you and Kimberly." Michael bowed deeply. There was no trace of the prideful man he had been. Instead, his figure was one of pure remorse. I let out a deep sigh. Honestly, seeing him like this, it was hard to feel simple hatred. "Michael, I'll be straight with you. What you did, both back in middle school and recently, is not something I can easily forgive." I saw his shoulders slump. "But," I continued, choosing my words carefully, I'm sure you had your reasons. Michael looked up, tears glistening in his eyes as he began to speak. My father, he was strict. He always said I had to be the best, no exceptions. Back in middle school, every time you beat me, his punishments got worse. That's why I resorted to underhanded tactics. His voice faltered. Even as an adult, I couldn't escape that trauma. I thought I always had to be on top, always had to use someone as a stepping stone. But in the end, it's all my weakness. I know it's just an excuse. He bowed his head again, deeply. After a moment of silence, I finally spoke. People can change. This can be the turning point for you. While I can't forgive what you've done in the past, how you live from now on is up to you. Do your best. Michael looked up in surprise. Tears glistened in his eyes. Thank you, Gabriel. I swear, I'll become a better person. I'll be expecting it. I gave a slight nod. Michael bowed deeply several more times before walking away. His figure no longer carried the intimidating aura of the past. Instead, he seemed to radiate a sense of newfound determination. I looked up at the sky. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is learning and growing from them. I couldn't help but hope that Michael's future would be better. 6 months later, the atmosphere at the Starlight Learning Center had changed dramatically. Gabriel, look at this. Kimberly said excitedly, holding up a report. I took it from her and read through it. Student enrollment has doubled? Yes. The Starlight Anywhere system you developed is a huge hit. Starlight Anywhere. This was the unique online learning platform we developed. It provides tailored problems based on each student's individual learning progress. Moreover, it allows real-time interaction with instructors. And even though it's priced at about 70% of traditional in-person lessons, our profit margins have actually increased. Kimberly's words prompted me to examine the report in greater detail. It was true, by cutting costs for classroom maintenance and personnel, we had achieved high profitability while keeping prices affordable. This is fantastic. A win-win for the students and for us. That's not all. The collaboration with the study guides you created with Mr. Irwin has been a massive success. Bundling the books with the online course for $198 has brought in twice the expected revenue. Parents and students alike have praised it as affordable and highly comprehensive, providing quality education at a reasonable price. It feels like our vision has finally come to life. I couldn't help but smile. Looking out the window, I saw the twilight sky spreading above, balancing price and quality while reaching as many students as possible. This was the goal we had always been working toward. At that moment, my eyes were drawn to the glow of the setting sun reflected in Kimberly's gaze. Kimberly. Her name slipped out before I realized it. She tilted her head slightly, looking back at me with curiosity. That simple gesture was so endearing it made my heart race. Thank you. It's because of you that we've come this far. As I expressed my honest feelings, a faint blush spread across her cheeks. I should be thanking you. I wouldn't have grown this much without you, Gabriel. Her voice was soft but carried a clear sincerity. On impulse, I took her hand. It was warm and gentle. Her earlier words suddenly came to mind. Remember when you said you didn't understand how I felt? Do you still not know? At those words, a faint blush spread across Kimberly's cheeks. Well, that is. She faltered over her words. I gave her a gentle smile and softly took her hand. My feelings haven't changed. I love you, Kimberly. And I want to be with you, always. I love you too, Gabriel. But sometimes, I still feel unsure. Like I'm not good enough for you. Her voice was barely audible. I pulled her into a gentle embrace. Kimberly, you're amazing. To me, to the students, and as my partner in life. Gabriel. Kimberly buried her face in my chest. We stayed like that, holding each other for a while. Outside the window, the twilight sky was slowly giving way to the night. Pulling back slightly, I met her gaze directly. The workday is over. How about we grab some dinner together? Right now? Of course, I'd love to. Great. There's a place I've been wanting to try. What kind of place? You'll see when we get there, I said with a wink. As we prepared to leave the office, I glanced at Kimberly's profile. As a colleague and an irreplaceable partner, the joy of being able to continue walking alongside her filled my heart completely. Rising from a life of poverty to building a successful learning academy, I've always poured every ounce of effort into my journey. But it's not just about working hard. By approaching people with sincerity and confronting my work with genuine dedication, I was able to earn the trust of those around me. Meeting Kimberly deepened this understanding even further. Her presence reaffirmed the importance of unwavering effort and sincerity. The true brilliance of life comes from small, consistent efforts and authentic connections with others. No matter how challenging the situation, as long as we hold on to these two principles, a path forward will always reveal itself. My life is proof of that. And so, I will continue to carry effort and sincerity in my heart, striving for even greater heights. Because I believe that is the only way to make life truly shine.